You gonna sing in the choir too? Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, we don't have a bell up here today, but I am going to share something. When I was growing up, I used to watch Miss Frances at Ding Dong School. So all of you remember she had that big bell, which is why even if there was a bell, I wasn't going to ring it because I'm not Miss Frances. So, my name is Judith Newby, and I will be leading worship along with Pastor Sarah and our choir today. Welcome to the Church of the Good Shepherd. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We would like to give a special welcome to first-time guests. If you are here for the first time, please raise your hands and the ushers can bring you a gift. Oh, we have some first-timers this time. Good, excellent. Welcome. Now, if you would please stand in body or spirit and join me in the call to worship. Family of faith, God is at work.
God is healing and creating, redeeming and dreaming.
God is calling and sending, listening and loving.
God is at work.
May we celebrate our God who never gives up.
May we celebrate our God who holds on to hope.
Please be seated while we hear the readings and light the Advent candles. In a world full of fear, where do you see glimmers of peace?
I see glimmers of peace in the quiet of the early morning, when people shake hands, when loved ones say they're sorry, when the church sings together.
You are right. Even in a fearful world, peace is all around us.
Today we light the candle of peace as a reminder of this good news. May this flicker of light help us remember that even in a fearful world, peace is present. We only have to look for it.
This is a good reminder. If during the service you would like to light a candle for someone, or say a prayer for someone, you're welcome to do that at any time during the service.
Thanks be to God. Amen.
Amen.
Let us continue our service of worship by singing together our opening hymn, number 108, Isaiah the prophet has written of old, verses 1 through 4. be seated. Oh, you already are. Thank you. Welcome again to Church of the Good Shepherd. If you're here in person, you'll find our contact card in your program. Please fill it out and place it in the offering basket when it comes around. Please don't fold the paper because it makes it easier for the people who are reading it. If you're online and want to be included in our weekly email about activities and events at COGS, please include your preferred contact information in the chat. I'd also like everyone to please silence their cell phones. I will try and remember to tell you to turn them back on when the service is over. After the next musical piece, we will have a time of prayer together. If you would like to share joys or concerns with the community, you will find cards and pencils in the baskets under the chairs in front of you. Please pass them to the aisle and the ushers will bring them forward. If you are online, you can put your joys and concerns in the chat. First name only, please. Now let's be in the spirit of prayer as we participate in our opening reflection, looking out a prison window.
You should all have words in your bulletin since you can't see the screen right now. So please join us on the fourth verse. You'll recognize the tune.
These are the joys and concerns brought before our community this morning. First, a joy for flexibility. It's quite crowded this morning. We have a very full house, which is a great joy. I thank you for those making room, finding extra chairs. Oh, yes, we should light the candles. Susan will do it while we're doing joys and concerns. Thank you. And do we have joys or concerns from our Zoom audience this morning? Not yet. All right. Well, first we have a joy. Thanks for the warmth and festivities of the people of New Mexico that we create for each other. Joyful because students perform their dance routine. Yay! We have many concerns as well this morning. First, for our son John, who will have a second deep brain procedure on December 11th in Gainesville, Florida. So please keep John in prayer. And someone asks, I think this is a good prayer for all of us, condition us with humility and soothe our angers and frustrations. Someone has a concern that validated medical research is being ignored by our government. So prayers for all of those in the healthcare field, and for those who depend on medical research. Prayers for Sister Sarah Beth, who begins chemotherapy today. Prayers for our city of Albuquerque, and a reminder to vote on Tuesday. Concern for Barbara, who's become allergic to her heart medication. Prayers that some possibilities open up for her. And prayers for Penny, who is experiencing back pain. I'm sorry to hear that. Prayers of thanksgiving, Penny's able to be with us on Zoom. Let us pray. God, in your love and mercy, hear our prayers, those we've offered today in community and those that are still on our hearts. Hear the longings of our hearts during this season of expectation, and open us to hear the hope and all of the ways that you are calling us to serve. In Jesus' name, amen.
Today we have two readings from Scripture. Our first reading is from Isaiah chapter 43, verses 19 through 21. Be alert, be present. I'm about to do something brand new. It's bursting out. Don't you see it? There it is. I am making a road through the desert, rivers in the Badlands. Wild animals will say, thank you, the coyotes and the buzzards, because I provided water in the desert, rivers through the sun-baked earth, drinking water for the people I chose, the people I made especially for myself, a people custom-made to praise me. And our second reading is from Matthew chapter 11, verses 1 through 11. Now, when Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and proclaim the message in their cities. When John heard in prison what the Messiah was doing, he sent word by his disciples and said to them, are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another? Jesus answered them, go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk. Those with a skin disease are cleansed. The deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me. As they went away, Jesus began to speak to the crowds about John. What did you go out into the wilderness to look at? A reed shaken by the wind? What then did you go out to see? Someone dressed in soft robes? Look, those who wear soft robes are in royal palaces. What then did you go to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, "See, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you go. Truly, I tell you, among those born of woman, no one has risen greater than John the Baptist, and yet the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." God is still speaking.
And thank you to Anne Gilmore for this beautiful watercolor depicting the scene from Isaiah. She was inspired this week, so thank you for sharing your gift with us, Anne. So for children's time, no, it's not. It's time for all ages. For time for all ages, I could use a couple people who can follow directions. Yeah, Eli? And I need at least one person who can give directions. Joanna. All right, Joanna's gonna, all right, so following directions, what you're gonna do, just so you know, Joanna is gonna stand at the mic, and she's gonna look at the screen, but you're not gonna look at the screen, and she's gonna describe what's on the screen, and you're gonna draw it. All right, they're not complicated. Can I get any volunteers to come up? All right, Grace, Eli, come on up. All right, we got Grace and Eli, and Mango. Mango, you're not listen. All right, so pick a color. Do you want? All right, so the key is you cannot look at the screen. All right, there might be words or it might be a picture. All right, are you ready? All right, Joanna, go ahead and describe.
So I'm not going to read the words. I'm going to tell you what they are. So this is something that you eat that comes in a bun, but it is not a hamburger, and people get them at the ballpark, put relish and ketchup and mustard. And I happen to have an animal at home who becomes very warm during the summer, and that's another way of saying these words.
That is absolutely amazing. All right, so Eli's showing us, and Grace is showing us what they drew. It's like a hot dog. All right, so here's the fun thing. In my head, my expectation was that Joanna was gonna say, so y'all can look now, just what's on the screen, just says hot dog. And what I thought was that she was gonna tell you, write the letters hot dog. Because next what I was gonna have you do was draw this. All right, one last one. All right, don't look. Joanna, you're up. Here we go.
Okay, so remember how I discussed my very warm puppy during the summer? That's what I'm actually seeing right now. And there's like, he's drooling, you know how dogs stick their tongue out and the little drops of water are coming off. And there's a bright sun up in the corner shining at this very warm puppy with his tongue sticking out and drops of water coming off of his tongue. And his tail is up, but it is not wagging because he is hot. I'm a radiologist, by the way, so I have to describe images for my job.
That's impressive.
I didn't know that's what you were going to have me do. I promise I'm not a ringer.
Holy Spirit moment. Oh, that's perfect. Eli, that's great. I mean, Grace is a professional artist.
We have an actual artist up here, so you didn't know
But
that
Eli
she was going to be
really
we're
well
going to be a
done.
ringer.
All right. Grace, can we show what you... Grace is trying to go as fast as possible. You can't rush an artist. There we go. Yay, that's amazing. Let's give them a hand. All right. Can y'all talk about your experience for a second? You don't have to. Okay, you don't have to. Joanna, so tell us, what was it like giving directions for you?
Oh, I do that a lot. So
You do that a lot, so it's easy. Was it hard to listen? Yeah? What made it hard to listen?
I don't know, it's like if it was like something like completely random or if it was like actually what she was saying.
Right, so if it was completely random or what she was saying, you didn't know what to expect because you couldn't see the picture. You could only hear what Joanna was saying.
I was waiting for a trick.
Oh, Grace also had the expectation. Why would you have the expectation that there are tricks and twists and turns as a part of Time for All Ages, Grace? Where on earth would they get that idea? So it sounds like you had some expectations that maybe made this a little bit more difficult. Did you feel like you learned anything new in this process? Oh, I feel like all of us would disagree. Also, the courage to come up and do something creative is quite impressive. Grace, did you learn anything new?
I'll think of something at 10.
All right. I learned that I can always expect the unexpected. Joanna, anything?
I guess I thought I was supposed to describe the words, and I didn't. So it's always hard to know exactly what the instructions are in life.
So it turns out we can't read minds. All right, so during the season of expectation, this is part of what Jesus is asking us to do, is to be expectant, but also have an open mind. Because things may turn out a little bit differently than we expect when it comes to the birth of Jesus and the life of Jesus. They will evolve, Susan says. All right, let's say a prayer together. This is a repeat after me prayer. Dear God, thank you for hope. Help us have open minds as we approach Christmas. Amen. All right, let's respond to this good news by singing together, Come, O Long Expected Jesus. Y'all can... Onward. Though God doesn't always give us a complete picture. But we do get a picture of God's plans from the scripture, from the Holy Spirit. What else gives us a picture of what God is doing? Other people. Experience. Anyone grow up Methodist? All right. We talk about the Methodist quadrilateral another time. They have a whole, we'll talk about it another time. All right. So based on what we know, we tend to develop some expectations of what we think God's reign will look like. Sometimes, like what we hear in Isaiah in this beautiful picture that Anne drew, this world where even the coyotes and the buzzards give thanks because there's water in the desert and everyone is cared for. Unfortunately, expectations can sometimes get us into trouble. When I thought about the dangers of expectations, I thought of a story of a time when I was coming home from college one year with my brother. We were both in college on the East Coast, and we drove back to Texas via Tennessee, where my grandparents live. And we stopped in, we'd just finished all our exams, we'd driven for 10 hours, we were exhausted. And Grandma said, "I'm so glad you're here. Go to bed, sleep as late as you want." And so we sauntered into the kitchen at 10 a.m., and Grandma was furious. Does anyone have a good disappointed grandma face? Try it on for size. Well, the thing is, Grandma, when she said sleep in, Grandma had been up at 5 a.m. collecting eggs from the chickens that she then scrambled, and she cooked sausage that she had made herself. And she'd prepared this beautiful feast to show us how much she loved us. And she had thought sleep in meant 7 or 8. So when we wandered in at 10, there's a very grumpy grandma. Oh, I love that you have compassion for her. We thought she was making an exception to her early morning schedule because we were so tired. She was not. Unmet expectations can lead to some hurt. And it's good to keep that in mind, especially during the season of expectation in the Christian year that we call Advent. It's helped to be mindful, just what are you expecting this Advent as you anticipate Christmas morning? The holidays carry with them a lot of traditions and expectations. And there's some pressure associated with that. Anyone, the choir was here early, rehearsing for their cantata in 2 weeks. Y'all feeling any pressure about the expectations? It's a tough piece, right? Anyone else feeling a little bit of Christmas expectation pressure? Maybe? At least 3 of you. I'm so glad the rest of you are so relaxed going into the holiday season. Congratulations for that, if that's the case. So I want to encourage you to remember that Jesus says in John 12 that he didn't come to judge the world, but to save the world. So if you feel like you're falling short of expectations or that people are falling short of yours, maybe give yourself and other people a little bit of grace. What the folks in the Bible were expecting on Christmas morning was quite different from what they got. And John, for one, certainly expected Jesus to save him in a very specific way, namely to get him out of jail. John believed in Jesus with his whole heart. All right, we'll hear the story in a couple weeks of when John is still in his mom's belly and Mary shows up, John leaps in his mother's womb. He has a long history of loving Jesus. When John baptizes Jesus, he says, "Here is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." John loves Jesus. And he remembers that Jesus said he came to bring sight to the blind and good news to the poor and to set the captives free. Well, John's still in jail, and his execution is looming. His expectations of Jesus the Messiah are not lining up with reality. So he sends this question through his disciples: "Are you the one who is to come, or should we wait for another?" Now imagine saying that with a grumpy grandma face. Right? Are you the one to come, or should we wait for another? It's an honest, heartfelt question, but beneath it are some layers of disappointment. Jesus isn't the fix everything all at once superhero that John really wanted in that moment. He's feeling some doubt, and Reverend Bu-Young Lee puts it this way. She writes, "It's not doubt born of cynicism. It's the trembling that comes when conviction meets suffering, when the cost of faithfulness has been high and the fruit appears small. It's what hope sounds like when it's running thin." In her book, Carol Jordan gave me a copy of it. It's great. This book, Have a Beautiful, Terrible Day, Daily Meditations for the Ups, Downs, and In-Betweens. Kate Bowler has a prayer called "Good News is Hard to Find" that echoes what I think John is feeling. It says, "Oh God, this world and its peoples are hurting, and everywhere we look, there's something to lament. God, when will relief come? When will death be swallowed up forever and all tears be wiped away? When will come that promised time of everlasting joy and all things be made new?" Those are John's questions too. Questions I suspect resonate with a lot of us right now when our expectations don't quite line up with reality. So how does Jesus respond? Well, he doesn't doubt, or he doesn't shame John for doubting. Instead, he sends people with stories to tell. Maybe not the clear answer John was looking for. If I were John, I would have liked sending someone who can pick locks. But Jesus sends stories of miracles, miracles like people being able to see. We suspect probably not just literally, but spiritually, see for the first time. People who were dead are raised, and good news is coming to the poor. And I can't turn pages today. It's all right. This is funny. I printed the second half of my thing upside down. Why would it do that? You know, God has such a great sense of humor. All right. Yeah. Jesus doesn't give John freedom from jail. He gives him freedom from these expectations that Jesus is going to fix everything all at once. And that may not feel like freedom to John, especially when he's in jail. But I imagine that all of those stories of miracles do feel like a kind of liberation. John can't see the full picture yet, but those stories bring him a taste of the reality that God's love and justice are breaking in, even if John can't see it from his cell. It really isn't easy to see outside our own four walls sometimes. God says in Isaiah, I'm about to do a new thing. Do you not perceive it? Well, sometimes I don't. Not because God isn't working, but because I'm so stuck in what I'm dealing with that I'm not listening to all the people who are testifying to all the good that's happening. When we're in a dark place and we feel trapped, when we're hurt or disappointed that reality is falling short of our expectations, it can be tough to recognize that good is happening, that there is a bigger picture. And today's text reassures us it's okay to be in that place, to not know what good is out there, and to ask God for more. But then we have to listen. Our own experiences cannot be our only frame of reference. And one of the kindest and most loving things that you can do for someone is to listen to their stories and believe them, even if you've had different experiences. My brother and I, when we were at Grandma's house, thought she was awfully unreasonable at the time. But if we had stopped to listen, not just to her words, but to her hurt, we may have recognized that she was hurt because she wanted to show us love. Or the bigger picture was that Grandma loved us a whole lot, and she wanted to do something epic for us. And we missed the memo. And we could have said, oh, Grandma, I wish we'd known. We love eating with you, and we love how much hard work you put in. How can we help you make the next meal extra special? Listening beyond our own experiences and expectations means believing other people's testimony, even when we can't fully understand it. And that's what Jesus asks of John. That's what Advent asks of us. Reverend Bo-Young Lee says, hope in the gospel is not grounded in outcomes or visible success. Hope is rooted in perception. In trusting God is still at work, even when systems remain unchanged, even when prophets die behind bars. Advent does not require us to manufacture hope. It invites us to bring our emptied hope to Jesus, to ask the hard questions, and to listen again for signs of God's nearness. So this season, when expectations weigh heavy, remember listening may not give us the full picture, but it may help us see something new. I want to close with a clip from a UCC pastor in Oakland, California, Jorge Bautista. His last name means Baptist. So we're talking about John the Baptist. We have Jorge the Baptist. Jorge Bautista. He demonstrates what this can look like. For context, he recently, in October, showed up at a peaceful protest in Oakland. And while he was there, he was shot at close range with a pepper canister. He thought He would show up as clergy and be a mediator and a peaceful presence. But instead, he was met with violence. He did this interview shortly after. And pay attention to what he has to say.
I'm finding a lot of hope, actually. I'm looking at Chicago, as horrible as it is. I wish I was there right now with the people of Chicago. But boy, let me say, communities are showing up for each other. And that gives me a lot of hope, because we know there's power when we get organized and when we come together. We are able to bring change, and I know we're going to bring that change. It's going to happen. So let's keep believing in one another. Let's keep showing up for each other. Let's keep organizing. Let's keep screaming, doing whatever it takes to really get our message out. And I have hope that out of this, a lot of faith leaders will continue to share, especially in the United Church of Christ, why we stand on the side of our queer sisters and brothers, trans sisters and brothers, why we stand on the side of migrants, why we stand on the side of women, so on. So let's keep amplifying that voice, because we're doing something right.
He encountered violence, but he's listening to the stories of everybody else and saying, I have hope because I see all the ways that God is breaking through. May we do likewise. And may we open our ears and our hearts to all the ways that God is still speaking this Advent season. Amen. Let us pray. God, you meet us in our questions and our doubts when our hope is running thin. You are the God who says, I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? And sometimes we confess we don't. We're tired. We're hurt. We're waiting for good news to make itself clear. And still, you send us stories of healing, stories of justice, stories of voices crying out for liberation, stories of people who are made whole. You give us glimpses of your reign breaking through in unexpected places. So teach us to listen to the testimony of others, to the cries of those who are suffering, to the whispers of hope, even in prison cells of fear or disappointment. Loosen our grip on the expectations that confine us, and open us to receive what is your presence here and now. We pray all of this in the name of the one who brings good news to the poor and releases the captives, Jesus Christ. We lift up to you now our silent prayers. Remembering we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, ancestors and ancestors in the faith, let us continue now the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples, saying, Life giver who is in heaven, holy be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory now and forever. Amen.
Whether you're giving in person or online, giving your time, your talent, prayers, or money, let us take this time to be generous to God, who has been so generous to us. I invite you to put your connection cards in the baskets as they're passed along with it, and along with any donations that you would like to make to the ministries and mission of the church. To give online, please visit ucccogs.org/giving. The morning offering will now be received. God of generosity, we thank you for these gifts given today, in person and online, and those given throughout the week. Bless these gifts to your purposes, that we might continue to live into your call and to be the living body of Christ and be a force of healing in our world. Now, please remain standing in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 321, Break Now the Bread of Life.
Please be seated. Friends, the communion table is a place for people like John, those who believe deeply, but also those who are unsure. Here at Church of the Good Shepherd, we don't have rules about who can and cannot take communion. This is truly an open table. We say that if Jesus were here in person, and many of us would argue Jesus is here in person, but if Jesus were here and invited you to this meal, would you join him? And if so, then this is probably a table for you. Whether you've been great this week, whether you've been a real jerk, God invites you here. This is a table where we find healing, where we find meaning, where we find connection to one another, to God, and to Christians all around the world. We don't need to have the full picture or know how everything will turn out. We just need to come as people who are listening for the good news, listening for one another, and listening to the ways that God is still speaking. And thank you to folks who are serving communion this morning. But let's remember on the night that Jesus was betrayed by people who were afraid of him, he took the bread and he gave thanks to God and he blessed it and he broke it and he said, "This is like my body given for you." And likewise, after they had shared a meal together, he took the cup and he poured it out. And he said, "This is like my life poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins and the promise of new life." Let us pray. God, we thank you for the invitation to community and communion with you. We ask that you send your Spirit upon these elements, that they may become for us the bread of life and the cup of blessing, and that they may nourish us for your work. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. These are the gifts of God for the people of God, which is everybody here. And if you're online, we invite you to also participate with whatever elements you have where you are. We appreciate that you are participating in the sacrament with us. These are the gifts of God for the people of God. Come, for all is ready. And we have extra. We'll also bring communion to you. If you'd like to stay in your seat, raise your hand, let us know. We'll come to where you are. Before we jump into the life of the community, I have one thing that I'd like help with, if that's all right with y'all. Matthew Baugh, who is a minister who's been a part of our community for many, many years, is being installed as the new pastor at Placitas Presbyterian Church today at 2 o'clock. You're welcome to join me out in Placitas, but I also know that we have the Transgender 201 class today, and so a lot of you won't be able to make it. So I was wondering if I could just take a super quick video, if it's okay with you. And just say, "We love you, Matthew." Okay, can we do this? All right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
We love you, Matthew.
Thank you so much. Yeah. The other thing I need to share, which is tougher news, before we get into the fun stuff that's happening later, a longtime member of our church, they joined in 1992, a longtime member of our choir, Don Mitchell, passed away this week. I talked to Barbara this morning, she's doing okay. They're probably gonna do an internment actually out in California, where his kids are, in the spring. And we may do a small service here too, just because he meant so much to our choir and to so many of you. So please hold Barbara Mitchell in prayer as she mourns and also figures out next steps.
Now it's time for Life of the Community. At Church of the Good Shepherd, our mission is to build safe and brave spaces where people can experience the divine and participate in the healing of the world. Community events and activities are part of how we do that. And here are some of the events and opportunities coming up. I have a list of 3. I see Grace has one. If anybody else has any, please get in line behind Grace so we can move along, okay? The website team needs your help promoting your events. Please send the details to your event to Mary Lee Malloy and Emily Wheatcock Davis. I hope I said that right. Wheelock. Sorry, poor handwriting. Including the dates, time, location, and 1 to 2 pictures if you have them. Thank you. The book club meeting is tomorrow night at 6 p.m. at Ruth Berstrom's house. The book is The Way of the Wolf by Martin Bell. Contact Ruth if you plan to attend. Please remember to make a family happy this Christmas by taking a gift off of the giving tree. If you wish to donate funds, please designate Family Promise Giving Tree in the comment line. December 21st is the deadline for wrap packages, and Gail has told me that she would be happy to do your shopping for you. Gail's in the back, so if you'd rather just give her money and let her do all the legwork, please do so.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Grace, they, them, your Justice Chair, and just a reminder that we do have the Trans 201 training today. Did you have to attend the Trans 101 class? No. Did you have to sign up ahead of time? No. Come on and join us. We'll have food out here on the table. Got different things. So come eat, and then 12:30 we'll start the class, and I think that's it. Okay, thank you.
I'm Jacob, moderator. I just wanted to announce that now we're collecting for Advent season specialty donations to several of the funds that we do work with here as a church. They're UCC specialty funds too for different purposes throughout the church. And so you do have the option to donate now either online or just designating which fund you would like that to go through as well.
It's basically Staff Christmas and Veterans of the Cross, which is the UCC fund.
Yep. So again, just to clarify too, we're collecting donations for the staff fund and then the Veterans of the Cross. Right. Yep.
Okay, on December 21st, Hospitality is hosting a Winter Wonder Cookie Walk. We told you to look for it in the midweek bulletin, and it was there. And so it's going to be a fundraiser, but also a fundraiser. So folks that attend, and I think we have our cantata that day, so invite all those folks to come. We're also having this cookie walk, and you can buy a large mason jar, a small mason jar, or some individual cookies. And so we are looking for lots of bakers so that we have tons and tons of cookies in the cookie walk. And you can also sign up to donate jars to make fabric circles to put around the tops of the jars. And we have set up cleanup, and we're hoping to get youth involved. And over the next couple of weeks, we will be collecting and making snowflakes so that it is a winter wonderland, paper snowflakes. So anyway, get excited. Thanks.
Let's give a round of applause for our musicians and the tech crew today. As we close our service today, let's take a moment during our closing musical piece to reflect on all we've heard and experienced today, remembering God is with us and God is still speaking.
Go now in peace to love, to serve, and to experience the peace of Christ that passes all understanding. Amen.
We don't think any of the lunch bunch is going to come over.
I yelled at them and
You gave them fair warning.
I gave them full warning.
Okay, perfect. Then let's do this, y'all. Okay, this is Transgender 201, and I'm so excited to be here, and not just because I got to see Mango again. I'm happy to see y'all too. I'm still Adrian Lawyer. I use he pronouns. At TGRC, we have 2 EDs. Executive director is what we call the leader at a nonprofit usually, and we have 2 instead of 1, and Eric is the other one. So we are co-directors. That's our title. And I have my business cards up here, and I have a bunch of postcards about the center, including a brand new card that my assistant made about how to help the center. Like lots of different ways that you can plug in and assist TGRC if you're interested in doing that, not all just monetary. TGRC has been around since 2007. We do a ton of work for trans and non-binary people all over the state. You may have already heard me do this spiel, but I can't help it because someone in here has not heard me do it, so I've got to talk about the center a little bit. The heart there is some of the stuff we can do for people wherever they are in the state of New Mexico. So we really are a statewide organization, even though New Mexico is a very large rural state and it is hard to serve the more rural areas. But our case navigation team can distribute emergency financial assistance to Alamogordo, to Gallup, to Clovis, to Farmington, because we pay the bill, not the person, right? We're paying the electric bill, the mechanic, the veterinarian, whatever emergency the person's having that might throw them into such chaos that they won't be able to pay their rent. We want to help them with that because we want them to be able to pay the rent. We don't want people losing their housing if they're in housing. So we do lots of emergency financial assistance, but we can also help folks who don't need any financial assistance. We help people change their names legally, which usually ends up costing no money at all, actually. People are really inhibited about name changes because they think it's going to be expensive, and it's really not. Most people qualify for what's called free process, where you don't have to pay the court costs to do a name change. So, and if you do have to pay the court costs, then TGRC will gladly help with that. We want to help you change your name. And we want to help you update your real ID here in New Mexico to have the appropriate gender on it, because here in our state, we believe we're going to be able to do that for a long time, and we want people to have at least a state ID that's accepted all over the country as a valid form of ID that has their correct name and gender on it, especially as things just get kind of tougher and tougher. So our case nav team can help you wherever you are, even if you're in Albuquerque and just don't have any interest in coming to the building. So there's lots of ways. In fact, one of the cards up here is just about our support groups. We have 8 active groups. They meet once a month in person and once a month on Zoom. But now all of our groups have increasingly active Discord servers. So sometimes people are like, I just don't think that I could go to a group meeting even on Zoom. I feel too freaked out about that idea. But Discord is really a natural communication place, especially for young trans folks. And then we're having a lot of activities on our Discord for our youth group now too, homework night and movie night and craft night, all on Discord. So if you register for the support group, you never have to go to a meeting. They're going to send you a link to the Google group and the Discord server and let you plug into that community so that you can ask questions and answer questions and help folks out and get help, even if you're not the kind of person who would ever go to a meeting, a group meeting. So it says support group, but it means community groups and how to get plugged in. Then we have one card up here that is really just about how to ask for help remotely. The best way to reach out and get help from us without ever coming to the building. So we're really serious about that. So we really want people to be able to come and get help from us. We have a provider directory on our website, so you don't ever have to talk to anybody to look at that. That's available 24 hours a day. And if you know of a trans-friendly resource, we would ask you to go put it into the provider directory for us. If you go to that part of our website, you'll see how right at the top it allows you to click a link and add in a resource into that directory, which is really what we should start calling that, our resource directory instead of a provider directory. Because it does have medical providers and behavioral health providers, but we also want anything in there. Hair removal, hairstylists, realtors we have in there. If people know of friendly schools, charter schools, and they're willing to be listed, we want them in there. Really coffee shops, bookstores, any place where trans people can hang out and be safe and included, we really would like to have it in that directory. And especially if it's in Roswell or Gallup or Silver City, right? We're really trying to get those resources that are outside of Albuquerque into that directory. We have a transitional living program. It's called Casa Lola. It holds 6 people at a time, and we have a waiting list of about 40 right now waiting to get into Casa Lola. They have 12-month stays there while they're getting wraparound services so that we can try to place people into permanent, sustainable housing. We want them to be able to maintain an apartment of their own when they leave Casa Lola, and that's the idea of how we try to help them while they're with us. And we're full up right now at 6, with 6 folks who are highly motivated, really cool cohort over there right now. The bottom stuff down there in the white squares is really the stuff about our building here in town. So we have this big, beautiful building down on 4th Street, 4th and Constitution. And if you haven't ever come down to the building, I'd love it if you took my card and reach out to me, and we'll set up a time to give you a tour so you can come and see just how amazing it is down there and how much good we do out of that building. It's really, really incredible. We bought our building about a year ago, and we were so happy to be able to do that. It was from a really incredibly generous gift from a friend of ours who died that we didn't know had any money at all. And they had a lot of money. They had so much money, and we had no idea. It was sort of like a movie, except people would be like, that movie, people aren't gonna believe that. So try to make it more realistic, right? We were like, what is going on here when we got that phone call? But now we own a wonderful building where we're able to do tons of services and even rent space to our friends at Equality New Mexico and our friend Laurel Walcott, who's a nurse practitioner who does primary care and gender affirming care for trans and non-binary folks, but also cisgender people too. So she's a really terrific NP, and she works out of our building and is really inclusive and really accepting and really non-judgmental. So a lot of cool stuff going on in the building, and including a youth room that is getting more and more active all the time because we hired a youth specialist a couple of months ago who's absolutely incredible. They're already in there doing so many activities with the parents and the kids, and they've split the youth group into a youth group and a young adults group finally, which we knew was a natural line of demarcation, but we just didn't have the staff to get in there and want to take charge like that. So super exciting stuff that's going on in the youth space right now. So advocacy work in nonprofits is how we think we change the world, you know? Feeding people is what drew me and Zane into this work, actually. We were really worried about trans people here in our community that we thought were falling through the cracks, you know? But if you just feed people, everything stays the way it is right now. And you just try to help keep people alive and on life support, which isn't the goal, you know? That's a community level goal, but we want things to change. We don't want people to be so hungry and so homeless just because they're trans. So this to us is how you do that. There's lots of ways you do that. Lots of people believe you do that by getting out in the streets and stuff like that. But in our world, in my professional world, advocacy and education are the things that we think are going to shift things along with other folks doing their part too out in the streets, right? That's just not what we do. For us, this is the way we think we can make a difference, and we do. So if people ever want help where they work with trans, like policy, yeah, but also just trans inclusion, you know. Sometimes people just want us to come in and check out like bathrooms, you know, your bathrooms here in the building. Would a trans or non-binary person feel comfortable walking into the building for the first time as a guest and then needing to use the bathroom? I can tell you that. And some folks in here may not be able to think about it the same way that I would, right? Because if you're not a gender variant person, my sincere hope for you is that the bathroom is not something you think about, right? That's the way you're supposed to live, is like, oops, I need to pee. Let me find a bathroom. Did it. I'm out. Let's move on with my life, right? But for gender variant people, it's like, uh-oh, I have to pee. Now what am I going to do? Now I have to go and see if there's a bathroom here, and then I have to see if it's a bathroom I think I can use. And if I don't think I can use the bathroom, I have to make the agonizing decision of whether to do it and see if somebody's going to freak out on me, or to keep trying to hold it until I can get home or whatever I can do next. So it gets really hard for people just to come and visit something as lovely as y'all's space if they don't really believe that the bathroom is a safe place for them. And if it doesn't say anything, gender variant people don't take that as a reassurance, you know? It has to actually proactively say, like, you are welcome in this bathroom, or everyone should use the bathroom that most closely identifies with their gender, or whatever. We have signs. I have some really great signs, actually, that I can send you templates of that you can laminate and hang up in there. In fact, my favorite I got from Fort Lewis College up in Durango. When I walked up to train in one of their buildings, I went to the bathroom and there was a sign in there and I was like, can I have that? And they were like, oh yeah, you can use that. Like you can share that with people. And I was like, cool, send me a PDF. And it basically says, if you think someone's in the wrong bathroom, like don't worry about it. You know, like it kind of actually even says like people who you think are in the wrong bathroom are really scared. And usually they've been hurt in bathrooms and stuff like that. So can you just please let them go to the bathroom? And you also can just go to the bathroom and everything's going to be okay. And you have it on like trans flag colors. And a trans person walks in and sees a sign instructing cisgender people to chillax in the bathroom. And they know that they're not the first person to come in here and have to go to the bathroom, right? So that's the kind of stuff we do, is just help people think about their space, their materials, their written materials, their digital materials. I mean, y'all, even things like job postings or volunteer postings for a church could make someone trans feel that they weren't really welcome in that position if you don't think about the words that you use. And if you are cis, you don't know which ones are right and wrong, so you just have to get our help, okay? That happens to me all the time. I have to get people's help all the time because I have a ton of dominant traits, you know? And when you have a dominant trait, you just don't see the thing that the person with the vulnerable trait is going to see. Like, as far as I know, I'm not autistic, but so many of my friends are. I think I'm what they call gifted, which has some interesting overlap there. Like, some sounds make me feel really weird, and I don't like things like sticky on my hands, right? But I don't think I'm autistic, and I have many friends who are. And so they are the ones who have to tell me, like, hey, I walked into this room and hated it in here. Here's some things you could do easily at the drop-in center that would let people feel more comfortable if they came in and were different kinds of neurodivergent, right? And I wouldn't know, because how would I know? When I walked in, the lights didn't bother me. That's the whole point, is I wouldn't know that, right? I'm not a Spanish speaker, so I don't know, right? There's so many things that I just don't know unless somebody helps me to know that. So we're always thrilled for feedback, and we're always happy to give feedback from a trans point of view if anybody wants it. The other kind of advocacy that we do is legislative, you know. 501c3s are actually permitted to do legislative lobbying, and I think we tie our own hands by believing we're not allowed to do it. But what the law actually says, or the code, the IRS code, says you can only spend a certain percentage of your staff time doing it. So you just have to be careful about how many people engage in it and how much, you know, how much of the week you're giving to that during session. The thing about session here is that it's already time limited. So you're not doing it 12 months out of the year. You're doing it for this very restricted time anyway. And if you have a staff like we do of about 18 people, you can have somebody almost dedicated to thinking about session, at least, you know, as a C3. So we try to join in and be good partners in our coalition group, because as a C3, we don't lead the way on this usually. We just contribute. We help to figure out what the agenda is going to be, and then we just try to help whip votes the best we can with the limited time we have to offer. But in my career, there were 2 times that I kind of pushed our coalition and said we need to target these laws in particular, and we were the ones who drafted the first bills, and we were kind of the ones who got in there and led in a way that isn't normal for us. And that was updating the birth certificate law called the Vital Records Act, and then the Name Change Act here in New Mexico had some outdated stuff in it too. So we got rid of the requirement to put your name change in the newspaper for 2 weeks before you go in front of the judge. I know, right? Like, how many people were harmed by that? And y'all, we collected stories, and there was somebody in Roswell who told me that the mayor outed them from the stage on a mic because of their publication, and got up on the stage and was like, I hear the Smith's daughter is becoming a man, like, in front of all these people at a public event, you know? So in Albuquerque, we could kind of hide our publications in this weird legal newspaper, but in Roswell, it was in the paper, where people are reading the paper every morning, you know? So it's like not a good thing. Plus, trans people hated that, but so did victims of domestic violence, victims of human trafficking. There are people who go to change their name just to get more safety and more privacy, and then putting it in the paper is the opposite, right? And it had a reason. All these laws had reasons at one time, but they've just become completely obsolete, and nobody changes the law except us. We're the ones who do it. I didn't know that. I know that sounds ignorant, but I really didn't know anything about the legislative process when I started a nonprofit. I didn't really know anything about nonprofits. How smart is that? I'd never even worked in one. So Great job, me. But I really thought that somebody was reviewing state laws to see if they were out of date, and that really doesn't exist. There's no such person. So it's us, y'all. It's us. We should go find out if we need to repeal the spittoon laws. You know, like you may not spit on the sidewalk law. You know, there's all got to be weird old laws about wagon wheels and stuff like that, you know? Like stuff we just do not have anymore, right? So yeah, we got those things updated. Now you no longer have to have surgery on your genitalia to change the gender on your own birth certificate, which was the most outdated thing in the world, so we got rid of that. Plus we added the X marker to birth certificates here with that law. So it's kind of enshrined that now here, if you change your birth certificate after your original birth certificate's been issued, if you amend your birth certificate's gender, you can choose M, F, or X as your option. Which is sweeping the Western world right now. We were the 14th state to do it. So sometimes when I say that, I think people are wondering if I thought of it. I definitely did not think of X. We were just catching the wave. By the time we did it here, we were just falling in line with entities all around the world who are looking for a third option, as culturally we open our eyes to the fact that there's not just two kinds of people. Because most of us in here were taught that growing up for sure, and it's no shame, right? I was definitely taught there are only boys and girls, or men and women, and literally nothing else. There is no other category, is what I was told. And I bet you were too. And I was also literally told, you're a boy if you have a penis, you're a girl if you have a vagina. You're a boy if you have a penis, girl if you have a vagina. Right? So if we say that, we're saying penis equals boy. Like there is no way to be a boy without a penis, and if you have a penis, there's no way to be something other than a boy. And I'm going to tell y'all all that's not true, right? So as we realize that non-binary people are not new, and that they are real and valid, and that different cultures have recognized different genders for thousands of years, we have to culturally align with that too, you know? In a culture that's been so rigidly binary for such a long time, X is a really big step to me in terms of sort of admitting that we've been looking at this the wrong way, and that it's time to even kind of bureaucratically like reassess and accommodate a group of people that we've been sort of pretending didn't exist for a really long time. And I'm trans myself, y'all. I didn't grow up hearing about non-binary people. I'd never heard of any such thing. When I first heard of that, it probably was 15 or 20 years ago now. And I'm 55, right? So I was well into my adulthood when I was told there are people who are not a man and also not a woman. And my first thought was like, wait, what? Right? So if that feels like that to you too, that's okay. The main thing we got to do is just get past that into like, yeah, this has always been here. It just feels new to us, right? When you've never heard of something, it feels new. But this is not new. Not even a little bit, right? Okay, so the last thing we do is training, and y'all have done some training with me. Transcultural Fluency, or TCF, is our flagship training. I really do think I have done that training more than 4,000 times now, because I started doing it back in 2008 with good old PFLAG here in town. I was doing panels and stuff with them, and then realized I needed to break off because all of the Q&A was for me. So I was like, I think people need more training about this in particular. So we started the center, and we started doing trainings, and we started helping people all that time ago. And since then, we've trained just so many people. And I'm eager to train anybody else you can get me in front of. So 5 people is my minimum. I have to have a group of 5. At this stage in my career, I just cannot do it for 2 people. I just can't. We'll just sit down and talk or something. If I end up in a room with 2 people, we'll just have a dialogue, I guess, you know? But if you can get me 5 in a room or a Zoom room, I'll do any of our trainings, which let me tell you what they are. And by the way, now we have a training room in our building. So if you don't have a space, I do. All I need you to get me is 5 people. Or more is better. How about 500 people? 500 people would be great. So transcultural fluency has always been kind of our main offering. But this 201 is something we started to offer a few years ago for people who took that first training and said, now I'm ready to hear more about other topics that we can't dive into in a first 2-hour session, right? So that's what we're going to do today for sure. We do a pronoun and gender neutral language workshop about English, written and spoken English in particular. And it's been really helpful to people who are having a hard time getting over their resistance to like saying they for just one person. And that's an old English convention. Like English, we've done that in English since the 1300s. But all of us were raised after the Victorian era when it had gone horribly out of style. And our teachers even told us it was incorrect, which really wasn't true, but that they thought that, right? And so we all learned it was ungrammatical when really it was just out of fashion. And now it's really time to pick it back up. And this workshop will help you to feel more confident, right? That's mainly the thing, is that people feel nervous and apprehensive about doing something that feels so new, right? Also, I'm the grammar police in training, so I don't ever want anybody correcting my grammar. So I don't like saying things that I think might be incorrect. But this is not incorrect, y'all. And it's working. Be happy that you can use they instead of the neo pronouns. Take the neo pronoun workshop with me and I'll teach you why they is a happy medium here for sure. So I have about 45 folks who come out with me as panelists, and they're different kinds of trans and non-binary people. And then I have a few cisgender parents and partners who also join the panels, and they just tell their personal stories, and then we take Q&A as a group. So you don't just get my answer to your question, you get the panel's answer to the question, which can mean you get diverse answers to the same question, which is a great thing when that happens, actually. So a panel is always something that people have benefited from. Anytime I've done groups that let me come back to do multiple things, when we add a panel in, people are like, oh, that was amazing. The panel was so great. And if you're somebody in here who qualifies to be a panelist, and that sounds at all interesting to you, then grab my card on the way out and email me, because I'm always looking for new panelists. The trans or non-binary people, or parents and partners of trans and non-binary people is who I'm looking for. So think about that. Folks who join me on panels usually say they feel really empowered by it. That is a fun thing to do. Advocacy training is my favorite of the trainings right now, and it is about just really how to talk about this in a way that works, you know? Because many of us in this room, if you're here today, you've self-selected to be here, I bet you're talking about trans people where you're trying to like defend trans people, you know? And if you're out there defending trans people, you actually could be making it worse, not better, if you don't know the right tools for how to talk about it, right? People get alienated around this very easily, and it's hard to coax people closer, and that's the whole reason to even have a conversation like that. So let me give you everything in my toolbox to try to have that conversation make a difference, right? Have it get people to shift their attitudes and beliefs about this even a little bit. And then there's the book, yes. So I have some copies of the book here because some folks started getting on to me about not carrying them around to sell. So, and weirdly, our publisher doesn't give them to us. Like, I buy them from Thrift Books and then I bring them out and sell them. So if you want a copy of the book, I'm just reselling them here for $20. If you have 20 in cash, that's great. And if not, you can just go to our website and hit donate and just give 20 on the website and just take the book physically with you. That's fine. We don't need to account for them or anything. We believe you that you will put the donation in. And this book is not transcultural fluency. This is about gender transition, just like it says. So what does gender transition mean? What are all of the steps that could be considered part of a gender transition? And then how do you accomplish those steps, you know? So for me, my reader in my mind when I was writing was a trans person who doesn't have a resource center near where they live. So somebody who has a lot of questions about all of this and nowhere that they feel like they can call to get help or get answers, right? And Wiley usually pays their authors, but they were really happy to pay the center instead when we asked them. So all the royalties from that book go back to TGRC. So the book just keeps helping trans people. You know, it's just a good thing for trans folks. And also I've had some people who were not trans read the book and say they really felt like they learned a ton. Like, it's a really great way to get more intimately knowledgeable about what trans people go through, right? What we deal with. So, yeah, I'm not going to do a scheduled break, but you should take a break at any time. And if you need to leave, of course you should leave. It's totally okay, right? If you get a phone call, just hop out and take it. If you need to go to the bathroom, then just right down the hall. There's still more snacks out there. So if you need to stretch or move or anything, just do whatever you need to do. Take your coat off, put your coat on, interrupt me, ask questions, say things. Like, just be comfortable, okay? This does not have to be formal. But I'm not going to stop in the middle and be like, okay, let's take 10, everybody. Like, I don't like that. You lose people that way. It takes 20 really to get them back. And so I have too much stuff to say to give y'all that 20-minute break. So you just do what you need to do, including get up and walk out and come back in, leave, come back, do whatever you need, okay? I do talk about genitals in all of my trainings, I think, but it's really just minor. It's not a big deal. We're just talking about bodies because we're talking about trans people, so we do have to talk about genitals a little bit. And all questions are good questions to me. I mean that. Nothing will hurt my feelings, even if you kind of mean it in a mean way. Like, I think that just comes from not understanding, and I've been doing this a really long time. So you don't have to say it the right way for me to answer you. So just, if you have a question, try to be brave in front of each other and just spit it out. Like, just spit it out so we can get it out into the air and talk about it, okay? Okay, this is cool. This is a video about why are pink and blue. Okay, let's see if it'll go. No. Sometimes the little clickers will do it. Sometimes these things are set up that way. You never know.
Why was pink for boys and blue for girls? And did you know that young boys used to wear dresses? Pink for boys and blue for girls used to be the fashion rule, but when did that switch? And when did young boys stop wearing dresses? If you want to hear something a little confusing to modern sensibilities, an 1893 article in the New York Times gave the rule of thumb to, quote, always give pink to a boy and blue to a girl, which, to put it mildly, would make all those gender reveal parties a little confusing. But although today we take it for granted that blue is the color for boys and pink is the color equivalent of all things feminine, when did we first start making that assumption? And why pink and blue? Why not green for girls and lilac for boys? What is it about these two hues that cornered the market on infant fashion? Well, it seems like the answer to this puzzle lies somewhere in the 19th century style guides, our old friend advertising, and the advent of modern ultrasounds. But before we get into all of these important questions, we should first ask ourselves, what were babies wearing before pink and blue? Well, the perhaps unexpected answer to this question is that before babies were being outfitted in gender-specific pastels, they didn't wear colors at all. In fact, most babies in the US and Europe were sporting unisex white gowns and dresses, or gowns that were simply the color of the fabric that they were made from. Pastels didn't even play a part. And in these gowns, it was a convenience more than gender that was dictating the getup, since dresses without fitted bottoms made it easier for parents to change a child's soiled diapers and underclothing. Also, white wasn't just a matter of style, but a question of practicality. White clothing could be cleaned more easily either by using stronger soaps and bleach or outside without having to worry about maintaining and preserving their distinct colors. So not only did babies rock a surprisingly colorless wardrobe, they were also pretty much uniformly rocking dresses, a look that we now associate very strongly with femininity, girls, and women. But after checking out this picture of a young Franklin Roosevelt rocking a dress circa 1884, you have to admit that if even future presidents were wearing white dresses, then it wasn't just an anomaly. In fact, it was the fashion that young boys should wear dresses until they were about 6 or 7, when they would also receive their first haircuts. So through much of the 19th century, babies looked pretty indistinct, at least along gender lines, and it wasn't thought of as an issue at all. All children wore the same clothes, and that was thought of as the norm. But that brings us to our next question. When did colors come into play? Well, the idea that colors could be added to baby clothing in the US wasn't introduced in popular culture until the mid-19th century, according to Professor Joe B. Pauletti at the University of Maryland. But even then, colors weren't always so closely aligned to gender. That didn't come into play until after World War I. And when they did start getting lined up to certain baby genders, it wasn't always blue equals boy and pink is for girls. In fact, sometimes it was the opposite. Pauletti argues that in order for clothing to assume a certain gender identity or association, the pattern of use has to line up with concepts and cultural norms that we assume are unambiguously connected to a specific gender. And some of these assumptions are based on the pattern of use of a particular garment. Take, for example, the plain white t-shirt. In the 1940s, plain white t-shirts were considered a masculine garment because it was primarily circulating on men and being worn by men. Think back on some of the plain white tees sported by Marlon Brando and James Dean. But as time progressed, fashions changed, and now both men and women wear plain white tees regularly. So someone today wouldn't necessarily assume that this garment signifies a specific gender. This was the same for infant dresses and colors throughout the 19th century. Because the plain dresses were thought of as children's clothing more broadly, there wasn't a concern that they should wear distinct outfits based on whether they were boys or girls. And even as colors were introduced into the baby fashion lexicon, there wasn't a clear-cut formula down gender lines. For example, a June 1918 article in Earnshaw's Infants Department publication stated, "The generally accepted rule is pink for the boys and blue for the girls. The reason is that pink, being the more decided and strong color, is more suitable for the boy, while blue, which is more delicate and dainty, is prettier for the girl." Sounds strange now, doesn't it? Additionally, according to the Smithsonian Magazine, some sources note that blue should be for blonde and blue-eyed children, while pink was ideal for brown-eyed babies and brunettes. In 1927, Time Magazine had a style chart that suggested gender-appropriate colors for children, and department stores across the country suggested boys wear pink, including Filene's, Best & Co., Hales, and Marshall Field. So choosing colors based on gender was a fairly recent phenomenon, but if baby colors weren't always pink and blue, that leads us to our next question. When did pink become a color for girls, and when did blue get assigned to boys? Well, it seems that assigning pink and blue had a lot to do with manufacturers around the time current baby boomers were children. Because even though we've listed that some style guides suggested pink for boys, others argued for boys wearing blue and girls in pink. In the 1940s, manufacturers began making clothing that color coordinated for young boys and young girls, dividing the population between blue and pink color assignments based on what they believed the public would like and what they would buy. And eventually, the gendered color codes we know today won out. But as Paoletti argues, it could have gone the other way. There's really no dedicated logic behind the assignment of these colors to feminine and masculine qualities in the US. In fact, if you look around the world, colors can come to signify multiple meanings and rituals across cultures. For example, red in South Africa can stand for mourning, whereas in China, red can be a harbinger of good luck. In Germany and France, yellow can be a signifier of jealousy, whereas in Japan, yellow can be used for bravery, wealth, and refinement. And blue can be seen as a sign of different religious practices and carries special significance in Judaism, Catholicism in Latin America, and Hinduism. So, colors up for grabs as cultural markers, and the designation of pink and blue to certain genders was as much about the marketing choices at the beginning of the 20th century as it was about preferences believed to be tied to masculine and feminine traits. In fact, even though pink and blue color codes, boys wearing pants to emulate their fathers, and infant girls wearing dresses to mirror mom, saw a rise in popularity at the beginning of the 20th century, it somewhat waned in the 1960s. With the rise of the women's liberation movement, there was some easing in the manufacturer's push of color-coded and gender-specific clothing, with unisex clothes seeing some popularity again. So even though there still remained pink clothes for girls, there was a wider range of outfits designed to give young girls more freedom of movement and activity than the more standard dresses. But by the 1980s, we see the cementing of color-coded clothing for infants with specific gendering, and that may be related to improvements in ultrasound technology. Around 1985, when ultrasounds were getting clearer and clearer, parents were able to ask their healthcare provider the big question at the heart of every gender reveal video. Are we having a boy or a girl? And that's when products for infants geared towards a specific baby outcome increased in demand and popularity. Now, affluent parents and parents in general could design their nurseries and baby wardrobes around gender, and were urged to buy new sets of items for different genders instead of reusing unisex clothing and gear. This spread to all parts of the baby domain, from clothing to diapers, toys, and furniture. Also, the idea that a person should be able to distinguish a baby's gender as soon as you see them stood at the heart of many pushes to dress children in noticeably different clothing that would distinguish them one from another, whereas prior to the 20th century, this wasn't considered a pressing concern of most parents looking for baby attire. So, how does it all add up? Well, it seems like through most of the 19th century, US babies all wore dresses, and those dresses were almost always white. And parents, while still concerned with the identity of their babies, weren't as anxious to distinguish them from each other in infancy through their attire. In fact, children's clothes were designed with ease in mind, more so than displaying masculine or feminine traits. But as we got into the 20th century, style guides and companies started pushing particular colors for particular genders, in part because they were able to capitalize on parents' need to buy new clothing according to the gender of their child, instead of reusing or handing down unisex clothes. And although gendered colors were waning by the 60s and 70s, improvements in ultrasounds allowed parents to make predictions and nursery design plans around the gender of upcoming babies. So even though pink and blue could easily be reversed, it might not have changed how we conceive of gender in the popular domain, but rather how we draw associations and assumptions about gender based on certain color scheme.
Gender norms and stereotypes, y'all. It's interesting, right? Sometimes I look in my closet and just about everything in there is blue. And then I watch this, and I think it's just kind of I buy in the men's section, so it's like I get a lot of blue offered to me, also. But I watch this video and it's like, blue being delicate and dainty is for a little girl, and I'm like, look how funny that is. Like, it's so hilarious. We think this stuff is like some kind of ancient human knowledge that pink is for girls and blue is for boys, and we are the ones doing it. And we do it differently depending on when it is and where and who, all of this stuff just keeps shifting and changing over time. The roles and rules for women and men that were in place in the U.S. when I was a child are so incredibly different from the ones now, Exactly. You are not my first trainee to say that. Right.
Even in winter, we could wear snow pants, so we had to take them off before class.
Right. So someone who was at least perceived to be female as a child was told not to wear any pants at school. You could not wear pants. You had to wear a skirt. And snow pants could be worn only to get there and then taken off. Late 60s. Exactly right. And that's just when women were starting to wear pants, but it was still quite a countercultural thing, right? It was brazen, brave, right? Okay. This is not going to happen. Hold on. I gotta get my assistant to look at these slides, y'all. They act good. Can't even get them to work without doing this. Okay, so you may remember this from last time, but for me, when I do this job, it's an interesting thing to realize that we won't always be doing this job, I think that being trans is just a characteristic. So if you've ever heard me talk, you've heard me liken this to being left-handed or being born with red hair. And I call those things minority traits or minority characteristics. And humans have a really bad time integrating and understanding minority traits. When we're faced with minority traits, we usually freak out completely on that group. We call them evil. We say weird, whack stuff about them that couldn't even possibly be true. We said that people with red hair didn't have a soul. Did not have a soul. And so that's just individual though, right? That's not the hair, right? Some people are like, but I know some redheads and they are evil. And I'm like, but it's not the hair though, right? That's just them. I'm like, just saying, right? Same thing with lefties. We said lefties were possessed by the devil. Teachers would immobilize their little hands at school, y'all. To me, when I talk about that at my age, at 55, that sounds like something from like Roald Dahl. And then the teacher tied the child's little hand, and then finally a magic spell came, and they were turned into a cucumber. What? No, we don't do that.
The Latin word for left
Sinister.
is
Sinestra.
So
That's
dexterous, which means to be graceful.
capable.
Is right-handed.
So dexterous comes from the Latin for right, the root word for right. And the root word in Latin for left is sinestra, which now we see as the root of sinister, right? Meaning like evil, right? So even when we look at the etymology around Latin for left and right, we can see that prejudice against left-handed people goes way, way back, in certain cultures and others not. And now...
It's still happening. There was just recently this week, a documentary I saw post about a woman in Asia documenting her left-handed journey.
Sure. So this was a documentary that came out about a woman in Asia who is Asian documenting her left-handed journey because it was a difficulty, right? But I'm American and my training is based here, and so I can say, look at the progress we've made around both of those things, right? People in the U.S. dye their hair red now. So not only do they not fear violence from us, we're not about to like stone somebody for having red hair. Now people pay their own money to get their hair to be red because it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. Like we have movie stars with red hair. We have singing stars with red hair. Prince Harry has red hair, celebrities, right? People that we look up to, the most beautiful people in People magazine have red hair. But if you go back a couple of 100 years, we were saying really insane things about them and actually sometimes doing physical violence to them in the name of your minority trait is freaking me out, right? And then once we learned it's just a way that some percent, 1.7% of people are born with red hair, 12% of people are born left-handed. And as we slowly started to integrate that information, we got to the point where we didn't tie up their hands. We started to make scissors that worked better for their hands. And now there's whole stores full of things, left-handed can openers and left-handed guitars and left-handed scissors and left-handed everything, because we know that more than 1 in 10 people are left-handed. So why would we not have the adaptive tools they need to do the same things that right-handed people need to do? And even still, the world's very right-handed. I'm right-handed. So I never even notice, right? Every gear shift and doorknob and a milk carton, is made for me. And so I never even notice because it just works, right? And left-handed people are going around being like, how do you do this, And sometimes it's kind of harder on them just to do things that I take for granted. But that's just having a minority trait, I think. Being trans will always come with a need for certain accommodations for some of us. Some of us are going to need medical treatment no matter what cultural stuff we advance. Some of us will not be able to live with our own bodies unless we get the treatment that we need, right? So it's not gonna be ever easy to have a minority trait because it means you're in the minority. It means that the world is not set up for you in the same way that it is for the more dominant group. But when we accept and integrate each other, we at least don't have to fight the hostility, the stigma, the discrimination, the violence around having a trait that's really just a benign trait that's always been there, And what I've learned from other civil rights movements and reading about this is that education and personalization are what change people's attitudes about minority traits. And the way we learned to love redheaded people was being around them. And then also somebody teaching us that God did not have it in for redheaded people, right? And as we learned that, we just slowly started to be like, oh, no big deal. We just are side by side. It's just not, we don't have to worry about it. And now 53% of New Mexicans will tell you that they know a trans person. So we're getting there, this for me is the really hopeful thing about how we know someday a training like this will seem ridiculous to people in the way that if I had these trainings for left-handed people, no one would ever call me, Left-handed 201, y'all. Left-handed advocacy training. How to help other people feel better about left-handed people. Let me train you. What? No. If I had the slate of trainings, y'all would be like, wow, that got deep on some weirdness. Even left-handed 101's weird. Why would we need that, right? I don't want a training about left-handed people. I feel perfectly confident about that. But I'd love a training more about autistic people in my world right now. That's a minority trait that we still don't treat very well, and that affects a lot of trans people. So some trainings we still need today, and some we don't. But the goal is that someday all of these trainings will seem silly because we just know that this is all just a way that different people come. Different people have always been born these ways, and they always will be born these ways, and it's just other human beings, and no big deal. It's not a threat to any of us, right? Okay, so let's start with sex. I'm going to do the quickest run through I can of the 4 things. Biological sex, if you remember from last time, is a very complicated and actually diverse system made up of chromosomes, hormones, genitals, gonads, and gametes. And all 5 of those things need to be there if we're going to say biological sex. So saying biological sex can't be shorthand for saying genitals. If we mean genitals, we need to just say genitals. And if we say biological sex, we mean all of this stuff. Knowing full well that the genitals don't always match the gonads, and the genitals don't always match the chromosomes, right? This is called intersex. I have a really cool video for you about this. And intersex folks are also 1.7% of the population worldwide, just like redheads, right? So this is also just another way that folks have always been born. But because of intersex people, we can't use the phrase biological sex when we talk about sorting newborn babies, right? Most babies aren't born in a medical environment in the first place. So we know it's not a medical thing we're doing, right? It's just a visual observation. And it's based on the external genitals. So we don't say we sort babies based on biological sex. We say that that's called your designated sex. Because if you were born with a penis and testicles, somebody designated you male on your birth record. And if you were born with a vulva, somebody designated you female. And all of that to me is harm-free. I don't really think that's a big deal, you know? Like, as long as we can understand that sex and gender aren't the same thing, then I don't think this is a harmful thing. It's just, that's why we call it designated. In my world, not assigned. And anybody I train to teach about this, we don't use the word assigned sex. I've trained a lot of folks who deliver babies, like OB nurses and midwives and doulas, and they can't stand that when you call it assigned sex, because they're not doing something to the baby, you know? And we violently do surgery on intersex babies when they're little. And nobody did anything to me. I was born in a hospital in Oxford, Mississippi, and they just wrote down what they saw. And it was true. Like, they weren't lying about me. You know, that's not misgendering me. They were talking about a different thing than my gender. They were talking about my sex, right? And somebody that day said what they saw, and somebody wrote it down, and to me that was not anything that was done to me that was bad at all. So it wasn't assigned. The nurse didn't do it. It was just there. It was just true, right? So the designation takes place by whoever's observing the birth and attending the birth, and that's often not a medical person, right? So somebody just writes down what they see. And I mean, you know, more than 99% of the time, that's just accurate and totally cool, no biggie, right? But since these things may not match those internal things, we can't conflate these phrases. Biological sex and designated sex. So a binary system is a system of two things only. The gender binary is the name that's given to the theory that there's only two genders, right? So this is something that trans people have to kind of combat right now, because the dominant US culture was based on the gender binary in many ways. And so for 400 years, this idea has been very much woven into the fabric of the culture of the US. So the fact that we're finally realizing this isn't actually true is difficult for a lot of people. It feels like we're pushing on some old cultural beliefs, right? So for me, one of the things that helps me to get context around this always is intersex people. Because if there's a statistical swath of people whose bodies don't fit into the category of male or female, then how could every single one of the 8 billion people fit into the category of man or woman? Like, once we start to see that humans are just diverse, then we start to recognize, of course, there would have to be non-binary, right? If sex is diverse, then gender would have to be. Plus, there's so many cultures that have recognized 3, 4, 7 genders. Like with names and definitions, you know, 7 genders. It's a lot of genders, right? So we can see culturally that that never was the fact. It was just a belief. But these people are really the underlining of it all to me. It's so scientific, you know? And if they're the same number as redheads, that gives you a really good context for how common this is, right? Very much so. Now, some of these folks are born, actually, let me let them tell you. This is so interesting. I think we think they have both, and we think it would be physically obvious and that you would always be able to tell, and that is absolutely not true. Now, I have 2 videos in here. There's a non-binary video and an intersex video, and I think in one of them somebody uses some kind of coarse language, y'all, and I'm sorry. There's going to be one little moment of salty language in one of these videos, and it's not at all meant to be off-putting. These videos are so good, I think it's worth it. So I'm just apologize up front if that's offensive to people's ears. It's in the context of a bigger narrative here. Okay. All right. Usually not so far away from the computer either.
We ready?
Ready when you are.
Do you have a dick and vagina or ovaries and balls or another combination?
I have another combination. What have doctors done to try and fix you up?
That's a really big question, that one.
Can you have normal sex?
I hate the word normal.
It's confusing. So, are you transgender?
I really do detest being called an it.
What is intersex? Are you a hermaphrodite?
Bang right onto the target.
Okay, so firstly, hermaphrodite's considered a bit of a slur for intersex people.
It was a word that was used to describe us, but there was a misunderstanding about what that actually means.
Hermaphrodite means consisting of both sexes at the same time, so like in snails.
As soon as you say you're intersex, they think, oh, you know, you're a hermaphrodite, you've got both.
So you have a penis and a vagina. I mean, I'd love to have both of those things, but I don't.
Intersex is a person who has ambiguous sex organs and genitalia.
Where you're born with sex characteristics that are not typically male or female.
You can't just decide that you're an intersex person, you know, it's something you're born with, really.
I was born basically without any reproductive system at all, no vagina.
I had one ovary and one testicle.
And if you imagine like this is the penis, this is my testicles, I urinated out there between my penis and my testicles.
I think it's hard for most people to understand that there's not male, female, vagina, penis, that it's like, that there is a spectrum.
And we're just natural variations of the human population. We just don't happen to be at either end of the spectrum.
It's not caused by disease, it's not a virus, it's just a genetic anomaly.
1.7% of the world population is known to be born intersex.
And yet most people would say that they'd never met an intersex person, but probably more than likely they have.
I don't think people could pick me up off the street and be like, oh, he's an intersex person.
No, you can't spot us. That's the thing. And that's why we're not really sort of very well known about.
Well, unless we have a big sign on our head saying intersex and big glowing neon lights.
I'm not about to walk out into Burke Street and drop my pants and say, hey, look at this. So it's not surprising if now people, we've never heard of this before, where's this all come from? And it was always there.
It's out there, it's just not really seen or heard or spoken about.
Right, so once again, we're just talking about people, you know, another way that people have always existed and been, that we've just been in the dark about, really, you know? And I think for some folks, I've heard over the years, like, why do we have to have 2-hour class about this? You say it's 4% of the world population that are trans or non-binary, which is what I say, by the way. Why would we have to spend so many hours learning about this teeny tiny group of people? Well, that's why, right? When we repress these things, when we suppress them, the people who have these traits don't know that they're okay. They don't know that there's other people like them, and there always have been. For me, when I learned that there were gender variant people throughout all of human history, it kind of changed my life. For so many years in my life, I literally believed I was the only person who felt the way that I did. And it made me feel kind of crazy, you know? And then to realize, like, no, not only were there other people who felt the way that I did, there have always been other human beings who felt the way that I did. It was like coming home, you know? We have to know about these things. We have to talk about them. We have to be able to get information about them so that people who have these traits don't feel so isolated and afraid and alone. Plus, this is actually education and personalization are how we get to acceptance. So when we hide it, we push that back. We push it down the road, right? Okay, so we've been talking about sex. Let's do gender. Gender is what you know inside. Right? And this is so terrible to me. I want to have like stacks of textbook chapters up here about gender to hand out to you at the end of this, and like scientific information about gender so we can prove gender and all that stuff, but we don't have it yet, right? Because we all thought that sex and gender were the exact same thing. If you're a boy because you have a penis and you're a girl because you have a vagina, then there is, like, gender is genitals. Genitals are gender, right? That's what we all really grew up believing. But trans people exist, and trans people have a gender and sex that don't match. So for the first time, we have to be like, well, oops, gender is its own thing, right? This is its own thing. And I believe we're going to find this in the brain. I think in 20 or 30 years, we're going to have textbook chapters about this. I think we're going to know all kinds of stuff about it by then. But today, we're just at the outset of that because we've just begun to realize it's something we can study. It's something we can look for. It's something we can try to understand, right? So we don't tend to define it. We just describe it. And actually, right now, I'm kind of flirting with like calling this a belief, you know? Like, I think this is something you believe about yourself. You believe that you are a woman, a man, or a non-binary person. And it's a real deep, like, conviction. Right? It's something you believe so hard that most days I don't think you would even think about it. It's just like gravity, you know, it's just there and you just know it all the way down to your feet. And there's nothing I could say from up here that would get you to change your mind about which one of these you are. And that unshakable belief you have about being one of these things, that's what we're calling gender right now, right? And so my designated sex was female, but my gender is man. And I've known that and been showing it to other people and talking about it and making trouble about it since I was about 2. Really. Right? And in 72, I tried to tell my parents I was a boy, and they said, absolutely not. Don't say that. And I was like, uh-oh. Right? But horribly, I grew up in a sexist culture here in the U.S., and so I just tried to be a boy in the ways that a 2-year-old would think you would be a boy. And they just started calling me tomboy. Absolutely. And I was psyched. I wasn't even upset at that age. I was like, well, that they get that I'm not a girl then. I mean, it has the word boy in the word, you know? And I knew it wasn't as good as a boy, but I also knew it wasn't as bad as a girl, you know? And like people would look at me and know that I didn't want to like have a tea party or whatever, you know? Which now I would love to have a tea party. If anybody wants to have a tea party, I want to have a tea party, okay? If you want to go to St. James' little tea party place, I want to go there so bad. I love little tiny foods and I love tea, right? But as a child, like tea party was offensive to me because it was such a girly thing. Like, absolutely not, you know? And because of the way I looked and the way I acted, people were like, no, she definitely doesn't want to have a tea party. And I was like, right, I don't want to do that, right? So for me, this was an obvious thing even from a very young age, where for some trans people, they hide it better. They want to please their mom more than I did about this. You know, there are kids who try so hard to wear those dresses. When I like physically fought my mom to not wear a dress, I ran away. I had to be held down to put a dress on me, you know. Now, which doesn't mean that dresses make you a girl and not dresses make you a boy, right? I mean, like, let's just be really clear about that. The jeans and guns that I was so into as a toddler didn't make me a boy. I went to them because I was a boy and the people around me wouldn't listen. So I had only the vocabulary that a little child would have, and I was trying to show them something that they wouldn't understand, you know? So plenty of girls love jeans and guns, right? Plenty of boys don't. Right? So your gender is just that deep knowing. It's not what you do. That's actually called your gender expression. We'll get to that in a minute, right? So gender is just that knowledge. It may be something that you show on the outside to people, and it may be something you hide. But it still is a deep belief that's inside of you, and that's called gender. So the word transgender very simply means a person whose sex and gender do not match. It's not medical. And it's not binary. And the word cis is the opposite of trans. So this is a tough one right now for us because I get not a small number of cisgender folks who have a really strong reaction to this word. But this word shouldn't cause a reaction in you. To me, the best analogy to this word is right-handed, right? We keep talking about lefties. And if somebody walked up and said, hey, you're right-handed, you wouldn't be like, how dare you put a label on me, man? You know, you would just be like, yep, now what are we going to talk about? You know, like, okay, that's not very interesting, but you're right, I am right-handed, and it doesn't upset me for you to say so, right? Same thing, I'm white. If somebody walked up and said, you're white, I wouldn't be like, you're labeling me. Like, I am white. In fact, honestly, I'd be like, uh-oh, did I say something? You know, like, if somebody's pointing out your dominant trait, it might mean that you did something a little insensitive, right? Like people with dominant traits do sometimes, right? But even if you hear people going like, oh, cis people, like they don't mean you. So try not to take it personally, then you can just join into the conversation, right? Because it's true that for the person with the minority trait, the dominant trait is the group that does the damage, right? It doesn't mean the individual person with a dominant trait did any damage. So we just don't take it personally, and then we can be like, yeah, it's hard to be trans, I bet. Right? I wouldn't know, but that seems tough, you know? Instead of being like, oh my God, am I okay? All cis people are not bad. Like, of course, all cis people are not bad. Most cis people are not bad. Like, most trans people are not bad, right? It's just talking about the power structures, that's all. Not an offensive term. And then non-binary is the name we give to folks who don't feel like a man and who also don't feel like a woman, right? Okay, now here's the hard thing, and here's why we need pronoun pins. When I teach people to put their pronouns on or to say their pronouns when they introduce themselves today, they still feel really awkward. They're like, oh, do I have to? Like, do I have to say my pronouns when I introduce myself? And actually, yeah, you really do. Because you've grown up thinking your pronouns are quote unquote obvious, and these are the people who finally have taught us that there's no such thing. Because any one of us in this room could be non-binary. There is literally nothing about the way that you look that tells me that you're not non-binary. Non-binary people don't look androgynous. Non-binary people love to look stereotypically masculine and feminine sometimes. So even somebody with a beard, like that was my big revelation, and I'm so embarrassed to tell this story, y'all, but really, this is the era in which I came out. You know, I started my transition in 2004. I started testosterone in 2005. And about 4 years later, my beard had fully come in. And at that point, I was like, yes! Now everybody can tell I'm a he, right? Because I'm a beard. And then I met a non-binary person with a beard, and I was like, oops, it wasn't the beard, right? Like, I really thought the beard was what said I'm a man. But a person who wears a beard can be non-binary. There's nothing about the beard that is actually like genetically male. You know, it's like that ain't it. Pants, skirts, makeup, earrings, none of that is like that doesn't tell me your pronouns still, right? So even if you've thought your pronouns are obvious for a long time, today's the day where you can start to realize they're just not. And even if other people act like your pronouns are obvious, that's why you put this on. We put this on to say no one's pronouns are obvious, including mine. Don't forget, let's not guess about each other. I'm he. Don't guess, right? And when we wear our pronouns, when we display our pronouns, when they're on your business card, your email signature, that's when people start to realize like, oh, maybe I need to put my pronouns, you know? That's what starts the conversations. But it's not being an ally, it's actually giving necessary information about yourself that the other person has no way of getting. Pronouns, right? In fact, let me show you. Oh wait, here's the non-binary folks. Okay, hold on. This is such a good video. This is such a good video. I love these, all these different people having different non-binary experiences.
There's a whole variety of experiences that people have that cause them to question, like, hey, maybe I don't actually fit into the definition of, you know, man or woman, and that there's something else.
Hi, I'm Danny and I identify as non-binary.
I'm Lindsay and I identify as non-binary.
My name is Fang. I identify as a non-gendered person.
I'm Francois. I identify as genderqueer.
My name is James and I identify as non-binary.
Non-binary is someone whose gender doesn't fall within the context of the binary that we set up in society.
I am not male, I'm not female, I'm somewhere floating around in there.
Non-binary means acknowledging a wider range of experience.
For me, it means that I'm not identified with any specific gender, like male, female, or other things.
It's part of a larger kind of goal of questioning these assumptions about gender and questioning why there only need to be two.
It gives me the freedom to express myself. If I wake up one day and I want to spike my hair and do punk rock makeup, I can do it.
Every couple of decades, some designer decides that men's shorts are, you know, suddenly 5 inches shorter or 5 inches longer. In the 70s, if you look at what men were wearing, they were like Rockettes, like shorts were up to here, and now it's like, get it, you know, down to the knee. Non-binary is freedom from that whole game. It's like, I don't care what the men's department at Marshall suddenly has decided that like men need to wear. I'm gonna go for what makes me feel more authentic.
I tend to say gender is dependent on context and point of view.
To me, it just makes me comfortable that I can just be this body that I have.
I identified as a cis gay male. Cisgender is when your gender identity aligns with the gender that you were assigned at birth based on your anatomy. I saw myself as a cis man and just thought, well, I paint my nails and I wear lipstick, but I'm a cis man. And I knew what genderqueer was and non-binary. I knew of them And I was like, I support it, I love it, but it's over there. That's not me.
I identified as male before. I didn't really ever feel comfortable fitting into the masculine or male environments or just seeing myself as a man.
I've always had questions as a child. I always would put on my mother's makeup and her lipstick.
I identified quite a while before I came out to people.
I started identifying as non-binary when I was 17. I just knew that calling myself a woman and calling myself a girl did not feel accurate and did not feel good and did not feel like a home to me at that time in my life anymore.
Most people are still very confused about trans identity, non-binary, gender fluid.
Even though it's 2019, it's not something that everybody runs and be like, oh, you're genderqueer, yay, hugs and kisses, we love you still.
The hardest thing about coming out at 17 is no one believes you. Everyone is like, wow, that's a really cute phase you're having.
Even when I'm saying what I identify with, people still have a specific imagination of what that means.
Most people are going to assume that you're one of two genders, a man or a woman, and so every single day you have to be correcting them and you have to be declaring that you're non-binary to pretty much every new person that you meet.
People often misgender me. Like the second I leave New York, I get called man, like to my face.
A lot of times people get pronouns right twice, and then I find it's often the third time that people start slipping.
A lot of people think that we're transitioning for some reason.
Some people say, oh, so are you going through transition right now? And some people ask me, so do you still have a vagina?
Simplest way to ask about gender if you don't know someone is,
hey friend, what are your pronouns? That's it.
A lot of us are very different. Some people are like, don't misgender me, and it's a big thing. And I understand that, really I do.
Personally, I'm always very open and happy to talk to people about it.
I remember a few times I went on job interviews and I dressed like how I am, and I did very, very well in the first interview, and they're like, oh, you did so well. Just when you come next time, can you dress like a boy? It's especially challenging in dating.
No one really knows how to deal with you and whether they're allowed to be attracted to you, really.
Some people, they just say they want to date men.
the worst is whenever someone's like, well, yeah, but you have a penis, right? People will be very fixated with anatomical gender.
You can't be seen as heterosexual, you can't be seen as homosexual. And so when you try to date a girl, it's like, you're too feminine, and you're not masculine enough. And you try to date a guy who's gay, and he's like, you're not masculine enough, or you're too feminine, or something. It's always something.
I think people's knowledge of this is definitely getting a lot better with time.
We're becoming more relatable. People are seeing us for who we are. And so I think that brings about this general air of acceptance.
I think the future of gender identity, hopefully, is one where we don't force the binary on everybody.
I think the future of gender identity is so much more like colorful and wide and different and like varied as we think it even can be.
I hope that the future will move towards more of individual expression rather than this mob mentality to follow the crowd to be like everybody else.
I definitely wish that we can all just pass through this phase of trying to categorize people and just take them as what they are.
Being able to reclaim our narratives, I think that's the next step, is that trans voices are the ones speaking for trans people and non-binary voices become the ones speaking for non-binary people.
Isn't that helpful? To me, I love seeing different people. It's almost like a little panel that we had for about 7 minutes there. Because y'all are seeing so many different folks with different attitudes about all of this too, you know, even the way people relate to it. Like sometimes when I watch that video, I'm like often concerned about like Francois being like, some people don't like being misgendered, but I don't really mind. And then I'm like, but why not? Why can't they say that? You know, like that is true. For some people, using the wrong pronouns is a huge toll on their mental health, and it happens all day, every day. And for some people, their pronouns do feel even somewhat more like a preference to them. You know, and that's okay. We're all having different experiences of this, and it's important to know that, right? There isn't one perfect way to be a good friend to a trans or non-binary person. Okay, so for me, they're the ones, again, who are showing us that gender expression should be questioned all the time, right? We've been walking around thinking that somebody's outside tells us whether they're a man or a woman. And now we're realizing there are people who aren't a man or a woman, so how can we use the outside to see them? But that actually should help us see that we never should have been doing that in the first place, right? Because there's always been cisgender folks who don't dress the way they feel. And I know Glenn Close, and I bet you do too. No, I don't know her. Me and Glennie, I call her. Me and my best friend Glenn Close, who I know. I'm saying I'm intimately familiar with Glenn Close as an actress because she's been in movies since I was a child. So I immediately see that picture and I'm like, oh, she is dressed in that tux, you know? But if I didn't know who that was, I wouldn't know if they were trying to give us a feeling about their gender or if it's just a costume or an outfit or what, you know? Same thing with RuPaul. RuPaul's had a million chances to tell us if he's a woman. And he is not. He's a gay man. And he dresses up like this for his job and for his work and for his celebrity, you know? And in the queer community, drag is an old, wonderful, innate art form to our communities. So RuPaul's partaking of something that belongs to him culturally, you know? But he's not saying use different pronouns for me or, hey, I want y'all not to regard me as a woman. He's still RuPaul the whole time, you know? So putting on clothes doesn't make you who you are. Jeans and guns don't make you a boy, right? Like what I was saying. We fall back on those stories sometimes, so it's just really important to remember that this isn't what makes somebody, even for cis folks. And with binary trans folks, I think you see the same thing. Some of us, like me, I'm a binary trans person, right? My gender is man. It just fits right into one of the binary categories. Some folks like me dress in a way that's consistent with the stereotypes like I do. And other folks, I know transgender men who like to perform as drag queens. They don't like to be dressed as drag queens all the time, but it's fun to them on the weekends sometimes to get up in elaborate women's clothes and like lip sync to music and do this fun community thing. And to me, like that sounds abhorrent. Like my whole life wanted a dress on me and I still don't want one on me, you know? But that's not what makes me a man because there are other men who love to put on a dress, right? And then once you start looking at non-binary people, you're like, okay, now we really have no way of knowing. These folks are all on the screen because they have said that they are non-binary. And when I look at them, like some of them look a little bit like atypical, non-stereotypical, right? Where I might look and think, oh, I wonder what might be going on with that person's gender. But others of these folks, I would walk right by them on the street and my mind would just assume, you know? So we have to start teaching our mind not to assume. Because we are assuming wrongly about people's gender. I wish y'all could see this one even more up close, but I'm almost positive that I chose this poster because it's also all non-binary people. Now look in this set of images how stereotypical some of these folks look, you know? It's just super important to realize they really do look just like you and they look just like me. This is why we're wearing our pronouns. This is why we're putting our pronouns everywhere now. It's not to be PC. So this is the other hard thing about the appearance stuff, right? Is some of us have dysphoria and some of us don't. That's the other thing that I think makes people guess my pronouns right is that I have a beard and my voice is low and the shape of the bones in my face changed when I took testosterone. So because I needed to fix my body so I could live in it, now you look at me and think you see that I'm a man, right? Which for me was helpful in the beginning until I understood this more. I was like, yeah, I want everybody to see it, right? And now I'm like, oh, but you can't see it even with me. There is no seeing it, right? But because I had dysphoria and because I went to the doctor and got help, people think they can see it. But here's the tricky thing. Not all trans and non-binary people even have dysphoria. Having dysphoria is not a prerequisite to any of this. Some people don't hate their bodies, and some people don't want to have surgery, and some people don't want to take hormones. And some people do and can't. Right? So I especially think of my trans women friends who didn't have access to puberty blockers, and so they just grew to be 6'2", right? And some trans women are very petite because some cisgender men are quite small, right? Trans people run the gamut of size, shape, and size. But that means a percentage of trans women is going to grow to be very big unless we check that initial burst of testosterone for them medically, right? Hair removal is expensive, painful, and difficult. So some trans women, what seems to sort of give them away, quote unquote, is the hair, the stubble that peaks out by this time of day every day, no matter how closely they shave, right? So when you see somebody who maybe doesn't look like a woman to your brain or look like a man to your brain, once they've told you they are, it's important to just stick it. Just fix it. If she has stubble, then it's even more important for you to call her she than if she didn't, right? Plus, dysphoria is different for each person. Like, even for the ones who have dysphoria, it doesn't all look the same way. Each one of us is kind of on our own journey with all of this stuff. I've had friends who didn't really care about legally changing their name. I've had other friends who wanted surgery but not hormones. I've had other friends who wanted hormones but not surgery. It's just really, truly a journey, right? It fills up a whole book. It can't just be hormones and surgery, right? So orientation then is the last of the four things, and it's really just about who you're attracted to. It doesn't have anything to do with being trans. There's lots of different orientations. I can't even fit them into this training because we're not trying to dwell on this, right? But there's so many words to talk about attraction these days, which are very interesting words. But my point is, if you know that somebody's trans, you don't know which one of those they are. And the way we use those terms is relative, just like it is for cis people. So for instance, as a trans man, if I dated other men, I would be gay, trans and also gay. If I date women, I'm straight and trans. Right? So it's not about what people do in the bedroom or what body parts they have or use, because we don't need to know that. And all different kinds of people do all different kinds of sexual behaviors. So it's not the behavior, it's the partner. It's the gender of the people we're talking about, not what they do with one another, right? Kind of an interesting thing, because I think when we use these words, we're often thinking maybe of genitals, or not meaning to think of genitals, but sort of, vaguely thinking about people's sexual behaviors. But that's not really it, Okay, y'all, now we're going to get into some deeper content. This is tough. David is a really horrible story that happened, and I'm going to let the video explain it to you instead of telling you too much about it. But this is a really interesting and terrible tragedy that for us is important to talk about in our trainings, because it really validates the concept that we're trying to get across right now about gender being something that's fixed in each one of us and is not connected to our bodies and body parts. This is a child who's not intersex and who's not trans, who had a terrible thing happen, and I'm gonna let the video tell you, okay? But just remember, as you watch the video, David was not intersex and he was not trans. Right? This is a cisgender kid, and this is why for us this story is so crucial in the narrative of what we're trying to say about all of this.
Dr. John Money was a sexologist at Johns Hopkins University for many decades. He was kind of at the forefront of studying anomalies in gender, and actually had some relatively, for the time, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, at the height of his career into the 80s, had actually some fairly prescient thoughts about gay people, about trans people, but he also really took an interest in intersex people, children particularly, and was key in developing this notion that gender is not fixed for the first 2 or 3 years of life. So his theory was that if a child is born intersex, you just pick a gender, turn the child with surgery, hormones, whatever's necessary, into that gender and raise it in that gender. Most likely, most often, what was happening is that intersex children were being raised as girls. I think easy to understand, if a bit glib phrase for understanding this, that is it's easier to dig a hole than build a pole.
Wow.
So for medical reasons, it was easier to turn intersex children into girls when they may or may not, as they grew, understood themselves to be girls. And Dr. Money, as we get into in the film with some pretty extraordinary archival footage that we have of him, basically set out to prove this notion that a child's gender is malleable by taking a young boy who had his penis severely injured in a botched circumcision and moving towards surgery and a program of counseling to turn this 100% biological boy into a girl, with the thought that it would be better to be raised as a girl, even if you're a boy, than to be a boy without a penis.
And the story of David Reimer it comes maybe about midway through the movie,
Right.
and it really, and then the movie kind of slows down so you can get his story. And it is absolutely heartbreaking. He was not born intersex. He was made into something he never signed up for without his consent, in many ways without his family understanding.
Right.
Tell me about what happened to him, because it's truly a tragedy.
Yes, so as I say, injured in a botched circumcision. At around a year old, surgery was performed to entirely remove his penis, to castrate him, and he was told that he was a girl. His parents actually moved to another town for a while so that nobody would remember. And I should mention, and the reason that Dr. Money was so fascinated with his case, David was an identical twin. He had a twin brother named Brian. So the idea was, this will be a perfect test case. We're going to raise this boy as a girl, give the boy toys, make David, whose name they had changed to Brenda, make him wear dresses, give him girls' toys to play with, tell everyone he was a girl. He never felt comfortable being a girl because he understood, even though he didn't know his medical history, he understood himself to be the boy that he was. By the time he was a teenager, his parents told him the truth. He decided to go back to living as a boy. He ultimately had reconstruction of his penis. Hadn't been available when he was a baby in the 60s, but later in life it was possible. So he began living as a male. He actually got married, adopted the children of his wife, but his case spread. Dr. Money was spreading his case through medical records and medical journals as a huge success because David was anonymous, because the case, nobody was named. There was really no way for people to check up when Dr. Money's writing these reports like, this is great, we raised a boy as a girl, he was happy as a clam. Now, at a certain point, Dr. Money did stop writing. Dr. Money didn't keep talking about it, but he didn't retract what he had written.
I know, me too. It gets me every single time. It's horrible. It's so horrible. There's a book, a well-written book about this called As Nature Made Him. It's horrible. It's too awful for words, but it's not dissimilar to what happens to intersex kiddos for sure, and certainly to trans kids, right? And for us, that conversation around he understood himself to be a boy, that's exactly what I would say. That's exactly the way I say it and understand it and think about it too. Like I just always knew that I was a boy in the face of everyone around me not believing that. In the face of everyone around me being like, that's not possible. You're definitely not. I was like, but I am. I just am. I know I am. Right? And so when we see this with a cis person who got medically traumatized like this, we're like, that is exactly what we're talking about when we say gender, right? Cis people have gender the same way trans people do. It's just that for you, there's no friction around it because the genitals match the gender, and that's what everybody already thought was going to happen. And if that happens, then we just take it in stride and move forward, right? When something happens to the body, that's when it's revealed what's really going on. The body's not creating this or causing any of this, right? It just happens to match for 95% of humans. So we started to think that that's a causal relationship, when really it's not. The variation here is that there are people who don't match with those things, right? Okay, now this is some stuff that David has sort of, I should put David behind this slide because he's new for the 2012 for sure, but this is some stuff that feels quote unquote controversial. So for the transcultural fluency training, we don't try to jam it into that first 2 hours we get to spend with a group. It's just a little too much to get as deep as we're going to get right now. So I don't know why the idea of trans youth is controversial, because if 4% of human beings are trans or non-binary, then 4% of babies are trans or non-binary. Like, it's not like the babies are born cis and then at some point, like, poof, they turn into being trans, right? Like, I was saying this at 2 years old. I was like vehemently fighting to be understood at 2 years old. And even the American Academy of Pediatrics has said that, yeah, typical child development has kids knowing this about themselves by the time they turn 5. And certainly as early as young as I was. So my story is not even some remarkable, amazing thing where, like, how could a little one know that? Like, actually, no, I'm right in line with all kids, right? It's actually more unusual for someone not to know by the time they go to kindergarten. But because this is a stigmatized trait, that does happen. There are definitely folks I've known who were on a much longer journey to discovering this and understanding it and then being able to say it, right? So not everybody said it by the time they were 5, but if you ask trans adults, they'll say, I knew by the time I was 5, I just didn't even know how to articulate that, right? Even saying something like, I knew I was different about this, but I just didn't have the words. I didn't have the way of putting this out there, right? Okay, so kiddos, of course, are trans because people are trans. Now here's the interesting thing. If we can know this as young as 5, 3, 4, 2, that scares people, but it really doesn't need to, because there is no medical treatment for a child that age. There's not one medical thing that is even available to a trans 5-year-old. There's nothing to do. There's nothing that we would do, right? The very first available medical treatment for a trans kid is when puberty gets underway. It's not even right when it starts. It's when it sort of gets underway. And the treatment that can be applied then is puberty blocking drugs, which we'll talk about on the next slide. And puberty blocking drugs, as far as we can tell so far from the use and observation and study that's been done on it, have no side effects. They're the most reversible of the treatments we give to trans people. And when kids have been given blockers and then taken off of them, there's been nothing down the road that showed that they ever took it. So this is, to us, the safest treatment and potentially some of the most life-saving treatment. In fact, trans kids who go on to transition, who take blockers, 40 and 50 years later will say that they have a higher quality of life because they were able to take blockers as kids, because of how much control that gives you over your appearance and how people see you. Right? Blockers are a huge tool. But with 4 and 5-year-olds, with 8 and 9-year-olds, we're talking about hair. We're talking about clothes. We're talking about names. We're talking about pronouns. And I'm a dad. I have a 21-year-old. And honestly, I let them pick out their hair when they were little, which was way before we knew they were non-binary. My kid, we didn't know this about until they were a teen. How interesting is that? I'm a trans advocate. And in my family, my child's journey didn't have them telling us this until they were about 16, right? But even as a little one, when I didn't think that they were non-binary, I was like, of course you can cut your hair, grow your hair, whatever to your hair. It's your own hair. Same thing with the clothes. I always felt like, how could the child learn what reaction they wanted from their clothes and stuff if I didn't let them try different clothes, Like, if we're always controlling their little clothes and things like that, then they just don't learn. That's hard for them to learn, I think, right? And especially if you have a kid who's saying, my well-being depends on you letting me wear these clothes, then why on earth will we fight that? Just give them the clothes, right? Here's the interesting thing. What's up here on the screen is a diagnostic phrase that gets used about trans kids that sometimes helps to put people at ease. With our little ones, the gender is going to be consistent, persistent, and insistent. So do kids play about gender? Yes, they play about everything. They play like I'm a cat. put my bowl on the floor, you know? And I would also have put my child's bowl on the floor. Like, you want to be a cat today? Here's the bowl, right? I don't know any kids who went off to college eating from a bowl on the floor. So if they want to be a cat, like, let's just be a cat. I'm sure that that'll stop, right? With this, it doesn't stop, which is how we know we got in there, right? And if it did stop, then what? Sometimes people say that to me, like, what if my child comes to me and they say, I'm a girl, and I want you to call me Jenny. And we're like, okay, Jenny, got it, you know? And then a year later, that same kid comes back and says, you know what? I'm not Jenny. I appreciate all your help, and I'm Jim, and I'm just going to go back to being Jim. And I'm like, well, what if that did happen? Like, let's play that out, right? Like, then what happened? Nothing. And nothing happened, you know? To me, what happened in that scenario is your child learned that when they came with something serious to you, you took them seriously. And when they said, please help me, you did. And then you have that funny story about the year you made us call you Jenny, right? You can tell it at their high school graduation. Remember that year you made us call you Jenny? Here's the pictures we took, right? So just saying, to me, a child learns we're supporting them. A child learns we're hearing them. They learn we're taking them seriously, and that's not ever a bad thing, right? And honestly, if your kid changes their mind after a year of being Jenny, be glad that they don't have to live a trans life in this world right now, you know? And if they really are Jenny, then be so glad that you weren't the first person to try to obstruct them, right? Be glad that you were their first ally in all of that, the first person to help them find their way, not make it harder, right? And for parents who weren't able to do that, please do not carry that around. We all have our journeys, you know? Some of us struggle at first and then we get on board, and it's okay. Those parents always punish themselves really bad around our community, you know? Like if they didn't listen right off the bat. But this is not an easy thing. We're scared for our kids when they tell us stuff like this, right? For parents, when we get scared, we want to take control really bad. Okay, so puberty blockers are that first available treatment, and we have not seen any side effects, any irreversible side effects. These are RGNH agonist drugs. They block the production of these puberty hormones. It's a monthly injection or a subdermal implant that can last a few months at a time. And the kids who get these blockers report such high levels of satisfaction with it. Think about what I was saying earlier. If you can't block the puberty hormones, then your body is going to be tossed about and your genetic luck is just going to kick into gear. And so then you just have to hope you're lucky if you're a trans girl to be short or to have narrow shoulders, you know? Like it's just pure luck at that point. Even an Adam's apple can be removed with a simple outpatient procedure called a tracheal shave. But if I had a trans daughter, I would not want her to have surgery on her neck if I could have stopped the Adam's apple from growing in the first place. Like we don't want them to have to come in and try to like quote unquote correct these things if we could have headed them off in the first place, which now we have this knowledge to be able to do this. And these drugs have been used for a long, long time with cisgender kids who have what they call precocious puberty in the medical world. So if you start puberty at 6 or 7, that's thought of as a bad thing medically. It's not neutral. It's like it hurts your long bone growth, I think, and stuff like that. So they have to stop it. They have to stop it until you get a few years older, and this is how they do it. So for many, many years, these drugs have been used in a non-trans context, so we already knew they were really safe, you know? So it's a miracle treatment to a lot of people my age. Like the idea that you could, like for me, when my period came, y'all, that was my closest brush with suicide, to be sure. At 12 and 13, when my body stopped being more boyish and started to really like go hard towards the female, like physiological stuff, man, I went down hard emotionally, psychologically, mentally. Yeah. I didn't make an attempt, but I came really close. As a parent, I wouldn't want my child to be in the space I was in, right? That's too far. Yeah. So that's exactly what they do, right? We see way less suicide attempt with the kids who get these things. Way higher levels of mental health. Plus the ability to blend in if that's important to them. I have trans friends who don't care one whit about blending in. Blending in is not their number one priority at all, right? But I have other friends who long to blend in. And because of their genetic luck, they're never going to blend in. So if you can preserve that choice for a kid, why would you not want them to have the choice, right? Instead of it being not within their hands. Also, what typically happens then is if everyone in the family is agreed, like this kid's trans, we need to move forward with hormones, and the kid is like, yep, I need the hormones, let's go. You dovetail the blockers with the hormones. And then the child goes through puberty one time, at the right time, with their peers. And I went through puberty with my peers, but it was the wrong puberty. And then by the time I went into my right puberty, I was 35 years old. So for 4 years, I went through male puberty in my late 30s. That was very asynchronous. It was not cute. I had a lot of developmental stuff going on, right? I acted like a 16-year-old, but I was the dad of a little baby, and people thought I was an adult. So everybody around me was like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, yeah, really? What is wrong with me? Help me, right? I really wanted to run out of the room and slam the door and be like, no one understands me. You know, like it was terrible. I was all moody, not like angry. People are like, tea gives you rage. I wasn't rage, but I had moods. Oh, so many moods, right? So it's a lot to go through as an adult. Okay, so that's kids. Let's talk about family planning for trans people, right? For some trans people, this is not a difficult thing. There are certainly trans people who have the ability with their partner and their anatomy to just actually have sex and have a baby just the same way we would think straight cis people would do it, right? And sometimes that's because you have a trans man and a trans woman in a couple who are able to do those things, or a gay trans man who dates a cis man, right? So sometimes people have the matchup with a partner and the anatomy to just have a baby, right? But for a lot of us, it's very similar to gay and lesbian couples, where there's a lot of planning that has to go into it and figuring out how are you going to manage to do this, right? In my family, my ex wanted to have a child really badly. She was a cis woman. And for me as a trans man, absolutely not. And I have some really close friends who are men who gave birth to their own kids. And to me, they are as much of a man as I am, exactly the same. But my own psychology would not have allowed me to be pregnant. I just couldn't not have held that. Like that would have caused me to have a complete breakdown. And then giving birth to the baby, like no. Nar. So I was never going to do that, even if there was no other way. We were going to have to adopt a baby that was already born or something, because I couldn't do it. But she really wanted to do it, so we used a sperm donor from California, and we just kept picking guys who were similar to me in different ways that we thought were important. The one we ended up being successful with was a musician, and I'm a musician, I'm in a band. And my kid now turned out to be a music major and plays the saxophone. And it's super interesting, like who knows what's nature and nurture, right? But we tried to pick so that there was overlap there too. Stuff that was similar to me and my family and that person. So for us, it was about finding the right equation to have the kiddo that I have now, who's so amazing. But for other people, it could be adoption. It could be adopting the children of a partner that you get with who already has children, right? And as I was saying, for some people, there's like a, no hassle psychologically about giving birth if you have a uterus. And for other people, even having to go off testosterone for that long is unbearable. I've had trans guy friends who thought they wanted to get pregnant and didn't have a lot of dysphoria about the pregnancy part of it, but ceased the hormones so they would start to ovulate again, and were like, no, I can't live without the T. And you can't be on T and have a baby. Like T is teratogenic, it causes birth defects, right? So you can't take testosterone and go through this. You have to be willing to give it up for a while. So it's really interesting to think about how people plan families, how people execute family planning. And for each person, it's just going to be different based on kind of how they see themselves, what they need in all of this, how they're going to feel their gender is validated in the process, without being compromised if they can. Same thing with parenting, And to me, I resist a lot of this stuff. Like, I don't think teaching a child to drive is a man's job. Like, many a single mom has had to do the driving lesson. And in many a family where there's a mom and a dad, the dad's too impatient to do the driving lesson. Nobody would want dad teaching that driving. Get him out of there. He's going to be too mean to the kid. I'll do it. I got you, Or maybe an older sibling or an aunt, a favorite aunt, Like, it's not a gendered job in and of itself. But I know that in families, sometimes we grow up thinking of those things or dreaming of those things, and thinking, my dad taught me to drive and I can't wait when I'm a dad to teach my kid to drive. So for some folks, these things have a lot of significance, and for other people, they just feel like the jobs that have to be done, and how are we going to divide them up, Like the meal prep has to be done, I'm doing it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you do it the other days, right? For some people, it's like, to me, women cook and men don't cook, and I don't want to cook and I resist cooking or whatever, right? So, in all the different families and all the different trans people, folks just have a lot of different ways of handling these things. So it's important to remember that, because it's not always going to be the stereotypical thing, you know? I think even gay couples learn to sort of be like, ugh, to that, you know? Like, when I was coming out in the 80s, people would ask gay couples, like, who's the woman and who's the man? And it was like, what? They're both women. Like, what? That's why they're gay. Like, see, maybe you don't know what gay means, but gay means there's not a man. There's only women, you know? Like, what are you talking about? But we're so attached to these roles and this idea of this binary that even when we see something like that, we want to impose that idea, you know? And so I think with trans families, we hear some of that too, like, oh, well, you must be the one who's blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, I don't like that. I don't want to do that, you know? So it's just important to, for some people, they'll find that really affirming if you know that for them that would be a manly thing. For other people, that would be an offensive thing to even suggest, right? So let somebody take the lead in telling you how they feel about that stuff before you jump in and say, oh, that must be wonderful as a dad, you know? Because somebody might be like, oh, I still let my kids call me mom, you know, even though I'm a man now. I've known lots of trans parents like that. I think Caitlyn Jenner lets her kiddos call her dad still. I've seen them on TV and reality shows and stuff like that, and they very sweetly use she pronouns, and they say Caitlyn. They're not misgendering Caitlyn, but they say my dad, Caitlyn, you know, because they're adults. And I think for her, she was like, I'm not trying to take that away from you, and that's how you know me, and there's a sweet association with that because I've been your dad your whole life. Where for other trans people, I know it's like if you called them dad, it would just devastate them. Dad is a man word, so I don't want anyone calling me that because you might as well say I'm a man, right? So everybody's a little bit different. Oh, look what we got to. Sports. Are y'all ready for sports? Okay, here we go. I also can't believe this is controversial. If 4% of people are trans or non-binary, I don't know what percentage of that group wants to play sports, but it is not 50. It's not 50% of the 4%, okay? Especially the youth, y'all. Our youth like anime. They don't like sports. They're nerds. They're nerds and they like nerdy things. They like nerdy little video games and stuff like that. Most of them are a little bit autistic. They're just not into this. But as y'all know, there's going to always be some trans kids out there who are dying to play sports, varsity sports, college sports, of course. But what we're talking about is such a small group of individual people that we cannot believe it has come to this. Like, I literally cannot believe the number of laws that have now been passed to ban this tiny group of athletes from just gaining all of the same joy and experiences that come from playing these games, you know? For the people, I guess, but I don't even get that. To me, I don't even get that. We should talk more about it offline for sure. So let's talk about this, okay? Let's really just dig in. Because to me, when you peel back the layers of the argument, that's how you can really see that this is prejudice, right? If we take what people say about why this is not okay and we really pick it apart a little, it doesn't hold up that well, and then what's left is we just don't like them. And we just don't want them here, you know? So first, let's start with fairness, because that's the number one thing I get told is that it's not fair for trans girls to get to compete with cis girls. That all trans girls are bigger and stronger and more powerful, and therefore it's unfair to cisgender girls if transgender girls are allowed to compete, right? So the fundamental premise there then would be that sports are fair. Oh, I see. You see where I'm going with that, all right? I don't actually think that's true. And so let's talk about whether sports are fair in the first place or not, because if they're not, then that's not the reason to do this, right? And we know they're not, because there are several really dominating champion athletes that we know of that have physical anomalies that make them the dominant champion that they are. And Phelps is one that I never don't think about, because I was fully alive and watching TV throughout his reign, right? So for 3 straight Olympic Games, that man dominated the pool. And if you had spent your entire life training to swim competitively at the Olympic level, you were never going to win a gold medal if you had to get in the pool with him, because he was going to win the gold medal. And therefore, your gold medal was a silver medal. Even though you had trained since you were a baby in a bathtub to get ready to go there and try to win a gold medal, you could not win one. To me, I would have been so frustrated and discouraged, I don't even know what kind of acting out I would have done. Like, that's not fair. I don't see how that's fair. Especially when they started to look at Michael Phelps and his body, and they could see that he had things about him that were not typical. Atypical physical qualities that made him born to do the sport he was doing in a way that his competitors did not have. So like, oh, you mean like an unfair physical advantage? Whoops, okay. But we did not stop him. In fact, we celebrated it. There were magazine covers of him with 5,000 gold medals, like across his whole chest, and like he was the gold medalist man of all time. And nobody was like, but how is this fair to everybody else when he's so big and he has these big arms and webbed feet, toes, or whatever he had? Like, people did not say a thing about it. And he's just, like, if he were the only one, that'd be different, but we have Usain Bolt, look at the arm wrestling guy, right? Like, what? And then he was still allowed to be an arm wrestler when he was, like, born to be like, that's not fair. He had a giant arm, like a cartoon arm. Why? Exactly, bloom, right? Like, that was it, you were going down, right? So to me, if this is the case, and what about performance-enhancing drugs, y'all? We don't really care about that either unless you get caught, you know? Like, what about that thing where Tom Brady was, like, lowering the ball, like the balls weren't hard, you know? Like, I think in professional sports, there's quite a lot of cheating. There's cheating for gambling. We've just been hearing about that again now that gambling's legal. But when it was illegal, they still did it. They threw games to win money for people who would then pay that. You know, like the World Series controversy from the early 20th century. There's always been cheating in sports, like always. And we don't know which games it happens and doesn't happen. And we don't protest and freak out, except for these 5 kids wanting to play. So we're not really preserving fairness, right? Because fairness wasn't our goal in the first place. If we cared about that, we would have shown it before now. When we say that now, we're just saying, I want to rationalize my prejudice, right? Then for me, the other piece of this is, if we really did decide that trans folks did have some kind of advantage, there are ways to deal with that. Like, the sports world already allows for this, right? Like, think about even what y'all do. Like, there's all those categories for people so that even if you're a man, you can't be a 55-year-old man lifting those big weights against a 20-year-old man, because we just do assume that a 20-year-old has a different capacity than a 55-year-old. So it's not thought of as fair for me to have to go up against the 20-year-old and just be like, well, too bad, you're both men, right? It's about how much you weigh sometimes. There are different sports that you can only do against somebody who weighs about the same as you, or it would actually be dangerous for the person. What about intramural teams? In colleges, they're always co-ed, but you're not allowed to have like 4 men and 1 woman. You have to have a mix where there's not a super majority of a gender. Like, there's so many things we could try. Even in golf, they call it, this is such a, unfortunate term, but they call it handicapping your score, right? If you go to play golf and one person's like never played before and the other 3 are pretty good, then they would start further back so that the newbie could maybe have a chance of making it fun, And it's just willingly done, and like, you just do it, So there's lots of things we could try out, but the first thing we have to do is especially let kiddos just play. We have to let student athletes play on the field together for a few years and then analyze the data. And then we can say, like, yeah, actually a certain percentage of the time this is not working out right, Or we can be like, hey, it doesn't really seem to matter. It's all just probability, But we don't even know yet whether there's something we need to do, and we're already trying to cut these kids fully out of the activity. That's where it's like, oh, wait, that doesn't make sense, right? Oops, the argument just sort of fell apart, right? Plus, I have to tell y'all, I was raised, I came up a butch lesbian starting in 1984 until about 2004. So I feel like I was raised by second wave feminist lesbians, and they taught me that women are as good as men. Like, I don't know when we accepted the idea that no elite woman athlete could compete with any elite man athlete. Didn't Billie Jean King do that on TV? She beat that man like 50 years ago. To say women can beat men. And then we watched her do it, and they were like, but they can't, though. Like, wait, what? I think maybe they could. Like, who's going to be embarrassed? The men, if we let women on the field, This idea that we have to protect women from injury and from men and from other women and trans women, like, this is a weird way to think about women. Like, that's not how I was raised to think about women. Women are powerful, capable human beings. They don't need us to like shield them, you know? And especially not elite women athletes. They do not want us to shield them. They want us to let them out there to play. So I don't know. To me, let's try co-ed sport. Let's try. This is our opportunity to step back a few steps and just be like, how have sports been messed up this whole time? And how can we be creative about it now that we have to look at a new population that are coming into the equation, right? It's just like putting the X on the birth certificate. We didn't just say, I refuse. We said, here's a new wrinkle. What are we going to do, right? So don't forget, too, that Title IX, sometimes people want to tell me Title IX is why trans people shouldn't get to do it. Title IX was not to equalize the playing field in sports. It was because women weren't allowed to play sports at all. It was about taking a group that was seriously underserved and restricted and letting them onto the field. And now that is being said to be the reason why trans people can't get let onto the field? No. The spirit of Title IX is that trans people should be included. That doesn't make any sense. And if there are problems, we will work them out, y'all. This is not some attempt to skew sports. It's just an attempt to join. No trans person would want to win unfairly. I know that. There's no trans person who'd be into having a gold medal that everybody thought they didn't fairly win, right?
But sports are already skewed. They have to have the Astros in baseball.
Sing it. You said it. You said it, right? With all the modern stuff, they are already skewed. That's exactly right. So to me, let's take this imperfect thing and let's let everybody do it who wants to do it. Okay, so bathrooms, to me, I don't think I have to labor on too much in here because y'all already know that trans people aren't dangerous in a bathroom, but we just know that for a fact. We don't really get, like, where do people think we've been going to the bathroom this whole time? You know, like, we're just in the bathroom already and everything's okay, you know? Unless you're trans, actually. You know, here's what we saw in our 2015 U.S. Trans Survey. 48% of the 28,000 people who were surveyed said that they sometimes avoided using the bathroom because of fear. 11%, 1 in 10, said they never used the bathroom because they were so afraid. And 8% of the folks in this survey said they had developed health problems like kidney infections and urinary tract infections from dehydrating themselves and holding it the way we do. So we're not, like, don't be scared of us in the bathroom. We're scared of you, right? And in a place like this, we don't need to be scared of each other at all. There's nothing to be scared of. People just want to go to the bathroom. In all of my years, I've never been presented with a single news report or police report of a trans woman hurting a cis woman in a bathroom. Not one time, y'all. Not once. But there's so many reports of trans women getting hurt in bathrooms, right?
Well, it's a way of keeping people out of public. Like,
Exactly,
for example,
you said it.
Public restrooms are not available.
Yes, I love this.
For women, especially in London, there is nowhere to pee in public except in a pub, and they weren't allowed to go into them.
Right.
There's a Crystal Palace exhibition that had
Yes.
large public restrooms.
I love
and they
this.
charged money because they wanted to keep the poor people out.
Correct, right?
But it was before that. If you were a woman, you had to go before you left and hold it to you.
That's exactly right.
Which meant you could only leave home for an hour or two.
Exactly.
At a time, unless maybe you were going to a friend's house where you knew it was safe.
To go to the
Because
bathroom.
that
That's
kept
right.
you from being able to do really anything.
Exactly. Just in case y'all couldn't hear, this history of public bathrooms is that there were no public bathrooms for women in like UK and America early on at all. And the point of it was that women weren't supposed to be roaming around like that, doing whatever they wanted. And it tethered you to somebody's home, mainly yours, but at least someone's home, if you had to be in a home to pee. If there was no place for you to go pee once you left the house, then you had to really like, that's what trans people think about even now. How am I going to go now and then not drink any water and la 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 la, right? It's like that.
If you were wearing a big long skirt, you kind of.
I know it. Yeah, exactly. So detransition, I only have a couple more minutes with y'all. We're not going to get through everything I want to as usual, but I do want to talk about this real quick and probably show y'all this video before we break up. So detransitioning is what people call it when you reverse any medical transition you've done, and desisting is what folks call it right now if you just stop where you are and just go no further, but you don't actively try to turn it around, right? And this happens. Of course it does. But it's actually quite a small percentage of people who we've ever found do this. And the main reasons for them doing it are up on the board now. It's not usually just simple patient regret. But here's the most important thing to remember about that. There is no available medical treatment that doesn't have a documented rate of patient regret. So even things as benign as penicillin, there's a group of patients that say, if I'd known it was going to make me feel that way, I wouldn't have let you give it to me. And things like chemotherapy and back surgery have really high, like double digits rates of patient regret, because those things are supposed to help, and in the end, often they make it worse, and people are like, dang, I wish I would have known, right? Even people who chemotherapy saved their lives, a lot of them say, like, I would never do it again. And if I could go back in a time machine, I wouldn't have done it then, because it was just too unbearable, right? So when you look at the rate of regret for us versus things like back surgery, it's like microscopic. So of course there will always be that. That should not be what costs people access to these things, right? Okay, here's this, and then I'm gonna have to let y'all go, even though I hate it. Always, there's so much more to say. These are some detransitioners. It's a little mini panel video, so I want you to hear this.
There's not just one way to detransition, just like there's not one way to transition, right? I think we think that when someone says they're detransitioning, we automatically assume this is how that's gonna go. And we do the same thing with transitioning. So understanding that it is extremely complex, just as transitioning is, and there's many reasons why people go off of hormones or detransition or get different surgeries and things like that. I say I'm detransitioning because of the medical side of it. I'm not on hormones anymore, which was testosterone for me, and I don't identify as a transgender man anymore. I want to personally stay away from labels because I found myself to get really caught up in trying to fit perfectly into that label. And then that just suppresses a lot of other sides to me that I have because I'm a very fluid person. So I think like just understanding that this journey is hard for a lot of people, and we're just trying to figure it out and have peace with ourselves and our bodies. So to just have empathy for people who detransition, just like you would for someone who transitions. I support everyone to have the life that they want and whatever brings them happiness. And I do not regret my transition. I do not regret my journey, any of those things in life. I've learned so many beautiful things about myself, and I think that everyone should explore and discover different parts of themselves. I'm half Lebanese, so being on hormones, I got really hairy. And as great as that is for the masculine part, I was someone who was very uncomfortable with body hair. So when I trimmed all of my hair, that helped me a lot. And I started to feel really good. And it gave me a more androgynous face. I didn't have the softness to my face still. It still has like a hardness to it, a more mature look. And I like those things. So lately my gender euphoria is like at the highest. I mean, I feel really good. I feel comfortable. I can wear whatever I want and feel comfortable, but I also no longer care what people are saying about me.
Yeah, I am detransitioning, and it's for my own reasonings. And I wouldn't want my story to be used at all to throw hate within the trans community. And even if my story was to be used to throw hate at the trans community, I will shoot that down. So yes, I am detransitioning. And it's not for anybody to understand but me. And I know that I am also doing what is best for me.
I'm detransitioning, and for context, this is what I used to look like, and then I looked like this, and now I look like this. I think that if somebody wants to transition, they should still transition. I think that we should support trans teens and trans kids. I think that we should support underprivileged trans adults. I think that we should stop pushing this idea that we know better for somebody else, because I would have never known even an iota of who I am now if I hadn't transitioned.
I don't blame the doctors. I thank the doctors. I don't blame other trans people. I thank other trans people. I never had a delusion about who I was or what I was experiencing. I just had doctors who were on my side and who helped me be able to figure it out one way or the other. I'm not ruined. Let people be.
See, to me, this is like, now this is a new thing that people are scared about, but we've always been all on our journeys, you know? We think about people who even do things like Botox or other things to change, you know, work out, do hardcore. I mean, shoot, y'all. I don't know why, but 2 times recently I've seen a movie or a TV show about straight cis men breaking their legs to get taller. Now they're having surgery where they break their legs and put rods in their legs to get taller because cis het men feel so bad when they're short in a culture like ours. And then we're like, we can't let a child take hormones because they might change their mind, but like, it's okay if they change their mind. These people did that and they're like, not saying, and all of y'all should have stopped me. They're like, I did this and I learned about myself and I don't want to undo it. I just don't want to go further now, right? So when we hear about detransition, that should not be something that we hear used as an argument against trans people or access to trans care, right? That's not what it's about. These people actually, to me, are part of our community. I don't think trans people should try to sweep these folks under the rug. They belong to us. They're part of us. And it's just all of us on this journey trying to figure this out the best we can, you know? Trying to protect people. When you hear it, like we gotta protect kids from having regret. We gotta protect women from trans women. When you hear we gotta protect somebody, like we gotta really think about what's really going on there. Because once we start talking like that, we're already infantilizing the group too, right? And did they ask us for that? Probably not. Okay, y'all are the best. I would love to come back for more training. Please come and get these things. Every single thing on the table is free except for the books. The books are $20 a piece. If you don't have cash, you can donate on the website. And we didn't get to this, but I'm going to send the slides over. Y'all are going to see that we're going to do an identity flower exercise. So I'm going to leave these with Grace so that if folks want to look at, like, do this, once you look at the slides, you're very welcome to do the exercise that we would have done in here together, thinking about our traits and characteristics and how they add up to how we get treated in the world that we have to walk through all the time, right? So we're talking about intersectionality as usual. Thank y'all so much for being here. I appreciate you. Please come and get this stuff. Thanks, y'all.